continue setting this up a little bit. It's just not quite how I want it. I see no one's in chat yet, so I guess I've got a little bit of time to get this sorted. Elizabeth Gregory, good to see you here. Oh, yeah, everyone is arriving now. Okay. Two Dog Night, good to see you. Amy Hall, good to see you guys. I'm in a bit of a worse way than I was yesterday. Oh, we've got a mod in, Bria, tuning in from France. Good to see you. Teresa, yes, you have caught another live. Today we're dealing with pages 111 to 122, and there's some crazy stuff in that section of the Morphy Affidavit as well. Gigi Jardine says, hi Nick, good to see you. Git, good evening from Sweden, good to see you. Timmy, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pick you up, especially from this side. Let me try. Okay. Bria says, how are you feeling today? It's quite a long answer to that. Sugeti Nona says, thanks for moderating today to Bria. Thanks a lot. Robbie says, how are your injuries? So I was actually kind of playing with Timmy this afternoon. Or he was playing with me. I was sort of trying to put a slipper on, and he thought it was a game, and he was sort of biting the slip and growling, in a friendly way. And then a cough snuck up on me, like out of the blue. I just suddenly coughed, like a big cough, and it's incredibly painful. It felt like I felt this jolt of extreme pain through my whole body, but especially my chest. And I felt like I'd broken something. This is from one sudden involuntary cough. And I don't know, I was kind of like in shock. It was just it was excruciating. And I would say that cough hurt more than actually falling. And I was sort of nimbly stepping around, a bit like a zombie, not really knowing what to do, but feeling like I need medical care, like ASAP. And then I called my doctor. They didn't have any. I wanted to go to a doctor today. And then I called around. It took quite a while to find a doctor that was available, like at short notice. Then I found someone. Now at short notice, now I've got to get ready very quickly. So I got a taxi, and I managed to get there on time. And it sort of worked out quite well in the end. The doctor examined me. Anyway, long story short, I did have x-rays, and he says I've got 2 cracked ribs, no internal problems otherwise. There's no contusions. He says my lungs look good, which is a relief. But he said, it's going to be 6 weeks. So it's so frustrating. I've been training quite hard, only to have all of that lost kind of over the next 6 weeks. And there's nothing really you can do with cracked ribs. You can't really do anything. You've just got to rest and heal. So, during this live stream, I'm going to really try not to cough, of course. I've got 2 glasses of water here. If I drink the water a few times, it's just as kind of a preventative measure. The doctor did give me really good, strong pain medication. I really got some, but what he gave me was better, I think stronger. And I've actually just woken up from that. And I'm obviously not going to be sleeping for a little while. So, yeah. Bria says it will be very difficult to breathe now. You have to let it heal back. Yeah, I can feel the pain right now. It's not like on a level of 1 to 10, I'd say it's a 2. It's not very painful. It feels slightly like a cramp, like I've got a slight cramp in my side. It's also not, to me, right now is leaning against the side. I'm not bruised on the outside, I'm bruised on the inside. And the pain inside my body is actually more painful than the grazing of my skin on the arm, which weirdly enough, it's sensitive, but it's not as bad as the pain on the inside, which is quite strange. Kathy, good to see you here. Yay, I made it live. How are you, Nick? So happy to see you and the gang. I feel the same, Mr. Mina. Lucky I didn't puncture a lung. That could so easily have happened. I think the doctor said there's a rib higher up that appears to be cracked, higher up in the chest and then lower down as well. So it's sort of there and there. But that was just incredibly painful. Almost was like dizzy. It was really, really, really painful. And now I've got to try and get through each day not coughing. I try and do a shallow cough if I need to clear my throat. I did ask the doctor for something that thins the mucus so that you can just sort of clear your throat. It's not going to build up and irritate. We'll see what that happens. We'll see whether that works. Patricia, how's your infection going? He says, you're okay, you look stiff. I'm in a bit more pain than I was yesterday, which I didn't really expect. Blue Sky says cracked ribs are very, very painful. Yeah, so I mean, in the movies, when someone gets shot in their chest or stomach, and they can still run around, no ways. That's not going to happen. So I did put a picture on Instagram of the X-rays. They must have taken 8 X-rays, and I started getting a bit like, isn't that a bit much? I mean, I don't want to be microwaved by the end of this. But anyway, they said it is quite difficult to see. It's one of the most dense areas of the human body. The bones are under layers of tissue and so on. And so it's quite a dense layer to sort of see through. And I looked at the X-rays myself. I actually asked the X-ray technician, I guess it's a radiographer, I said, are you seeing something? And she said, I'm not allowed to say, something like that, which really made me worried. So I said, do you mind if I have a look? And initially I couldn't see any damage whatsoever, which is what they say with these interstitial muscle tears and ligament, you're not really going to see anything. But I'm glad I did do it. The doctor did say he thought he saw two cracks. So the doctor also struggled to see anything. He said they're going to give it to the people who do this, specialists, I guess, and they blow it up and magnify it and go through it quite carefully. He was actually doing that on his computer where he was moving the cursor. The image was enhanced and larger, and so he was going through it very carefully. As I said, I did put one photo on Instagram. It's quite weird seeing the inside of my body like that. Elegant, yet somehow broken in a way. and in a way that still wasn't very clear. Amy says that radiologist has to tell you we are not allowed to say anything. Oh, the radiologist, yeah. Kathy says keep a pillow near you, it will help with coughing. So fortunately I'm in a pretty good place when I sit. I can sit without too much pain. Walking hurts a little bit more. Climbing steps isn't really a problem, but as soon as I bend over slightly, it's painful. Trying to get out a car, trying to get into a car, out of a car is super, super painful. Trying to lie down in bed and get out of bed, get into a chair or out of a chair, that's super, super painful as well. Kimberly says she's a retired nurse. Okay. I only put one photo there. I mean, they took quite a lot of photos from different angles. But you certainly don't see like a rib and then something. It's sort of nothing. At first glance, nothing seems to be wrong, which I guess that's good. But obviously, something is wrong. The doctor said he'll get back to me tomorrow after just doing a second kind of flyby. So. Thanks, and I appreciate that. Yeah, it's just so frustrating. It was such an unnecessary way to fall as well. It's not like the terrain was incredibly tricky. It's not like I was. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys about what actually happened just a little bit later. Kimberly says they are so painful. I've had them myself. I think this is one of the worst injuries I've ever had. It's easily top 3. I think it's the top 3 most worst injuries in terms of actual damage and also pain. Yeah. I wasn't going to go to the doctor because I felt like I was actually feeling a bit better. But then, as I say, that sudden cough was like, wow, incredibly, it was absolutely excruciating. It was actually scary and shocking because it was like, I don't know. I just hope I don't get COVID or a cold where I have to cough. I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. I guess you just take a heck of a lot of pain meds. Amy also says, thanks for being here. Yeah, it's just easier to actually do this and takes your mind off of it. I've also got a couple of milestones I want to tick off this month. Since I can't exercise, this is something I can do. So, okay, so guys, let's just see. Mo Rama, have had a cracked rib before, hurt really bad to laugh, cough, or sneeze. Yeah. Any sort of sudden intake of breath, Blue skies, nothing you can do about cracked ribs. Have to just wait it out until you heal. Yeah. SM Kovalinsky. Time should heal you. Yeah. Kirk M. I had a bad bike accident also. I hit a stop signpost that was cut. Sure. What were your injuries there? Kimberly says it helps to keep movement, which he is doing, but he needs to be careful. Yeah, I was thinking of walking on the treadmill slowly while I'm watching TV. I've actually got a treadmill in my lounge, so I think that might work. Maybe also swimming where I just kick, I lie on my back and kick, that could work, but I'm going to give myself a few more days before I do that. Cynthia says, hi all, I'm late, hopefully didn't miss much. You didn't miss much. Oh, shoulder dislocation. Well, I can imagine that's also really not fun. How long did that take to heal? Carol Gorgoni says you should be hugging a small pillow like they do when you have open heart surgery. It helps alleviate some of the pain. I do kind of, a lot of the time, obviously it's not this arm because it's Timmy's there, but a lot of the time I have my arm just here. If I walk, I have my arm here, almost like it's in a sling. Almost broke my neck, yeah. So the crazy thing with all of this wasn't like I was in a daydream, totally unprepared. An ambulance had passed me just a few minutes earlier with someone else that had fallen, and we'd also been prepped that there were a lot of tricky sections on the road, and I got through all of them. And so where I fell was actually wasn't tricky, it wasn't technical, wasn't anything. And so it's just silly and unnecessary and unfortunate. And it just shows you sometimes something happens that's not this big intriguing thing. It's just simple kind of human error. On the other hand, it's also not just human error. There's another element to it. But as I said, I'll talk to you guys about that another time. Give yourself time. Okay. Karina says, I fell over the handlebar, which jammed into my chest. I don't know whether I hit the handlebar. I don't even have a feeling that I was falling. It wasn't like, oh, I'm falling. It was just 1 minute I was riding, and the next there was gravel spraying right in front of my eyes. And I mean, I don't know how there was sort of no moment where I was like, oh, I'm falling. I was putting my hand in front of me, just riding, and then next moment in the dirt. Just so strange. Yvonne Phillips is here. Just tuned in. Okay, so enough about me. Let's get down to brass tacks. A little bit of this is a repeating just to reorientate ourselves with where we were yesterday. We're doing the April 22nd, 2021 interview. It's the very last time Barry spoke to law enforcement before his arrest. He was arrested about 2 weeks after this. And I think it's definitely one of the most important interviews he gave. And I think it's quite, you can see it's quite important that they did this one as well. So it says, in this interview, FBI agents showed Barry the audit results and discussed them, directly telling him in the end that Suzanne was not conscious Saturday evening, May 9th, or Sunday morning, May 10th, and Barry agreed, saying, yeah. Barry admitted, to me this is huge, Barry admitted to disposing of the tranquilizers. That to me sounds like, I don't know whether that literally means that he disposed of the tranquilizers that day or just that he threw them away. But if he disposed of them that day, that to me is pretty significant. He confirmed his last encounter with Suzanne was hearing her light snore. He explained his locations in the woods around his house on May 9th as looking for a turkey. Remember we spoke about anthropomorphization yesterday? So there's also this idea of someone who's a turkey. Now, you might say deer, chipmunk, turkey, none of it means anything. But think about, and it could mean nothing, it could definitely mean nothing. But it could also, one I think needs to explore certain possibilities. So just consider the concept of someone who is sun tanning, someone who has a lot of skin exposed to the sun, and the idea of browning a turkey that is in a situation where it's being cooked, right? There's also something about a turkey that's, we often have contempt for turkeys. We make fun of them. There's a element of it that's kind of like a sitting duck animal, being a turkey on Thanksgiving kind of thing. You know what I'm getting at? So I'm just saying, think about that as well. Because one's got to ask, was Barry really running after a turkey, or was he thinking of something within the construct of a turkey? Just something to consider. Carol says, just woke up from a nap. Hope I haven't missed much. You haven't missed much. So they agreed that the evidence in this case makes him look bad. Sorry, he agreed that the evidence in this case makes him look bad. But he says it's in God's hands. Agents told Barry that from his own words, when he says, I don't recall, that means he's lying, because he answered almost all of the audit questions with, I don't recall. It's quite interesting. Now we go to page 112. We're just reviewing really the last little bit that we dealt with yesterday, just so we know where we are today. At approximately 10:45 a.m., Special Agent Grusing and Special Agent Harris met Barry at France Reservoir in Salida, Colorado, at his request. So this very last, meeting was actually Barry's idea. Or it's possible that he chose the location and they needed to speak to him. I'm not quite, a little bit, sometimes the affidavit's a little bit ambiguous. Barry arrived driving his Bobcat. Now, this is also really interesting. The actions that Barry takes and that they observe in terms of the Bobcat are definitely interesting, which is why I've used it in the title of this episode. So he arrived driving his Bobcat, he parked, then he greeted agents and thanked them for meeting him. Barry said he was sorry. He said, yeah, I'm working right here. Sorry, we couldn't get somewhere a little less windy. So they sort of meet in kind of a remote place. He says, I got a couple of workers over there, so hopefully we can move pretty quickly. Special Agent Grusing told Barry it was up to him how much he wanted to accomplish today. Special Agent Grusing asked Barry how he's doing, and he spoke about Suzanne's birthday on the 30th, and the 10th is coming up. The 1-year anniversary was coming up of her disappearance. Special Agent Grusing explained that he and Special Agent Harris have put together an audit. And then they spoke a little bit about money, what he did with the money, and also that thing about Suzanne consistently sending good night or good morning messages to a lover, and then suddenly those messages stopped on Saturday evening, May 9th, and Sunday morning, May 10th. And now we are back to speed on page 113. So they've got some photos of Barry. He's wearing like a plaid shirt, dark glasses, and got his hands in his pockets. And Special Agent Grusing told Barry that for sure on Sunday morning, after Barry leaves, Suzanne would have been texting her lover, so her phone is either gone or inoperable. Another way of just addressing that is just the day before when Barry left, that is what Suzanne did, right? On the Saturday, Barry left and Suzanne said, guess who's home alone again, something like that. And so why didn't she do that on the Sunday? And so Barry responds with the word K. He doesn't say, she was quite busy on the Sunday, or he doesn't argue with that. So he seems to consent to that, or kind of agree or go along with that. Special Agent Grusing said that we have seen months of data from her phone. Barry said, and there's no evidence of anybody getting into my house after I left. So he's almost suggesting after he left, someone came into the house and did something, right? Faticus, thanks a lot for that. Thanks a lot, okay. And Special Agent Grissing said, that's correct. Barry said none. So Barry's sort of thinking, isn't there evidence in the house? That's sort of what he's wondering. Barry's silent for a moment and then turns towards Special Agent Harris and said, okay, go ahead. Special Agent Harris talked about how sometimes in marriages, spouses may see things differently, but it appears clear to investigators that Suzanne was taking steps to communicate to Barry that she was done with the marriage. Special Agent Harris referenced the text she sent asking to do it civilly, and also Suzanne saying that she forgot to say she would still do Barry's billing for him. And then this was Barry's response to that. Barry said, well, like I said, she never sat me down and said that to me, ever. She's made comments via text, but she has never sat me down and said, Barry, I want a divorce. Never. So do you think that's true? Do you think the things that you text, think about your own phone and think about what is on your own phone. Do you think the things that you text are totally disconnected and totally different from the things that you say to somebody? So do you think someone would text someone, I want to get a divorce, but you wouldn't actually say it to them? Do you think that that makes sense? Let's just have a look at your comments here. Mel Stiller says, I don't believe him. Teresa says, Barry's not speaking directly to the question. Not there yet, says sometimes. Yvonne says, texting is the same as speaking, in my opinion. So I would say that the texts are the tip of the iceberg. In other words, it's just my opinion that most of what you say is to someone close to you, someone who you live with, someone in a relationship, is verbalized. And then the texts are the tip of the iceberg, not the other way around. And so Barry's saying, she never sat me down and said to me, I want a divorce. And then he goes on to say, so I can see through an investigator's eye that they would look at something like that and say, well, yeah, if they were going to get a divorce, then Barry, might do something. But that's just not the case. I mean, absolutely not the case. So it's quite interesting how Barry says, through an investigator's eyes, he can see that they would say, oh, if they were going to get a divorce, Barry might do something. I find it a little bit strange. It seems like, what is he actually saying? Is he saying that they never spoke about divorce and that the texts are the text drunk texts or the text aberrations? I know. To me, lie still. Now we go to page 114. This is pretty pertinent. This is pretty important. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry again about the statement that Suzanne's lover told investigators where Jeff Libler said that Barry either found out about the affair or she said she was leaving him or both. And that is why Suzanne was not responding on Saturday or Sunday. Now think about that. That's kind of like a euphemism. It's kind of a euphemism to say that Jeff Libler, Jeff's opinion was that Barry found out, and that's why Suzanne's not responding. That's kind of a euphemism to say that Jeff seemed to suspect Barry found out and then killed Suzanne. I don't know if I'm crazy to think that. Like, is it a crazy statement to make? I think also in the affidavit, it's actually referred to in those words. I could be wrong. But what I'm trying to say is to say that is why Suzanne is not responding on Saturday or Sunday. if you're not responding on Saturday or Sunday, you never respond again. What are you talking about? Are you talking about someone that's sleeping? What are you actually talking about? What is being referenced here, right? And so what the agents are really doing is they're saying, this other guy, Jeff, was saying that if Barry did find out about the affair, that may have played a role in Suzanne not responding, which is, as I say, a euphemism. And so the question then is, what does Barry make of this statement? How does Barry respond? In other words, whether it's true or not, the concept is put out there. And so the question is, Barry, what do you think about it? Like, what's your response to this assertion, the suggestion? And this is the answer. And they're quite specific here. It's quite a lot of detail. They say, Barry pauses, shrugs his shoulders, and shakes his head from side to side. Quite a big reaction, right? In other words, they're saying, Barry, did you find out about the affair? And then did you do something? Barry pauses, shrugs his shoulders, and shakes his head from side to side. And then he says, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, I would not, if she would tell me, I love her so much that if she would say, Barry, I'm not happy, I've found love somewhere else, I would say, we don't need to get if this is what you want, I don't want to be with you if you don't love me. I love you, but I want you to be happy. I would have wrote her a check for half and let her on her way. Now, think about what he's saying there, and think about how we know Barry, just from all of these statements he's given. In other words, what Barry's saying is, if he did find out about the affair, he would have kind of been like, oh, so you found love somewhere else? I want you to be happy and I'll give you half and off you go. In other words, it's almost the most perfectly appropriate response possible, that he would still love her in a way. He says, I love her so much. And I would say, it's quite interesting that he interrupts himself. He says, we don't need to get her, cuts himself off, and he says, if this is what you want, I don't want to be with you if you don't love me, but I want you to be happy. So first of all, do you think that's true? Do you think Barry did want Suzanne to be happy? Do you think Barry wanted what Suzanne wanted? But let me just take you back. What do you think he meant when he said, we don't need to get her? What do you think that means? Ramarin talks about moral high ground. Kimberly Moore says Barry wouldn't accept that. Someone else says no way. Someone else says I don't buy that at all. Someone else says no way. Yvonne says that's laughable. That's exactly what he didn't say. Divorce, that's it. So if you look at this, it does seem like he was going to say, we don't need to get her, and then he cuts himself off. Now, I actually think that is how Barry felt. We don't need to get a divorce, or I don't want us to get a divorce. How can we avoid getting a divorce? Why do you think Barry doesn't want to get divorced? What happens if they do get divorced? Well, to me, just studying this case, it seems that my impression is that Suzanne has a lot more money than what he does. It seems like she recently inherited $500,000 and doesn't really need to work, whereas he does. And I don't know how well his jobs are doing, but if they do get divorced, he's going to suddenly need to spend money on his own place and so on, all those things. And so even though you kind of get this impression that even though there's infidelity, even though the marriage isn't really even a marriage anymore, there needs to still be a marriage. for certain reasons, right? What do you think about that? So I'm just going to read this again. So they're presenting this idea that you find out about the affair, and what do? Don't you do something? Don't you take matters in your own hands? And this is Barry's explanation for what he would do, and also, I guess, what he wouldn't do. So this is his defense. He pauses when he hears this, he shrugs his shoulders, he shakes his head, and then he says, I don't know what to say about that. And then he says something. He says, I mean, I would not, if she would tell me, I love her so much that if she would say, Barry, I'm not happy, I found love somewhere else, I would say, we don't need to get if this is what you want, I don't want to be with you if you don't love me. I love you, but I want you to be happy. I would have wrote her a check for half and let her be on her way. And it's quite interesting that he ends it off with something about money. It's almost like right at the end he says, I would have been fine to give her money, or I would have been fine to give her half. And I really find the last few words of the last sentence quite interesting, where he says, I would have wrote her a check and let her on her way. Right? Now, think about those words just in terms of on their own terms, and then almost the opposite to them. So the opposite is, I wouldn't have written her a check and let her go on her way, and I wasn't going to do that. She's having an affair. I'm not going to write her a check and let her on her way. That's the opposite. But look at also the words, let her on her way. I'm going to let her on her way. I'm going to kind of let her have her way. She's having an affair. I'm going to just let her on her way. Is Barry someone who's a controlling guy, or is he not? Is Barry a deep guy, or is he not? Is Barry someone who, in certain instances, is very adamant about things, he's very emotional, he's very certain, or is he kind of easygoing? Which one do you think it is? And it's quite important to take this statement and say, is this Barry? Is this Barry speaking? But in other words, Barry's just been presented with a scenario in a euphemistic way that he knew about something and responded in a certain way, where he was possibly angry and reactionary and whatnot. And Barry's saying, no, I wouldn't have reacted like that. In other words, he's saying, that's not my psychology. My psychology is, he says, I don't know what to say about that. Then he says, if she'd said, I'm not happy, I would say, it's quite interesting where he uses the word don't quite a few times. He says, we don't need to get her. Then he says, I don't want to be with you if you don't love me. I love you, but I want you to be happy. And remember what he said, anyway, and then he said, I would have wrote her a check for half and let her on her way. Now there's a footnote here, number 80, and it reads as follows. This statement contradicts Barry's text threatening suicide after Suzanne said, I'm done. His statements of controlling his hurt heart and hothead Barry found out and killed his wife, and God's judgment on Suzanne for cheating. So what is really interesting with law enforcement, and it's a very simple technique, is they kind of ask the same question over and over again, but in slightly different ways and with a slightly different, let's call it, angle of attack. Sometimes it'll be quite short and sweet. Sometimes it'll be quite euphemistic, as it is in this case. Sometimes it'll be by the way. And then what they look at is how he responds each time. In other words, is there congruency in his psychology? Is he thinking and reacting the same way? And so what they're showing here is that he's not. That's what they say. This statement, so where he says, what does he say? I'll be happy for you. He says, I want you to be happy. I love you, but I want you to be happy. I would have written you a check and let you on your way. And they say, this contrasts with Barry threatening suicide when she says, I'm done. That's quite an extreme thing to do. And then also hot-headed Barry found out and killed his wife. I can't remember whether Barry made the statement of hot-head Barry found out and killed his wife. I don't know if that's a reference to Jeff Libler or somebody else that his thinking would think that. I can't quite remember who that refers to, but it's also in the affidavit. Anyway, and then, he also repeatedly referred to God's judgment for Suzanne cheating. It's almost like he wasn't saying it directly. He wasn't saying God struck her down or God killed her or God took her life, but he seemed to be saying maybe there was an unhappy ending and that was God's judgment. It certainly doesn't seem to be God saying, I love you, my child, I'm happy, go forth and live happily ever after. So this is a distinct difference from that as well. It's a departure from that. Does that make sense? Now we go into page 115. As I say, this last interview is really interesting. Let's just look at some of your comments. Two Dog Night says, Timmy loves you. Timmy is sleeping. I think he uses me as ASMR. And I think he's not the only one. Tracy says, I still live in our hometown. Jean Karras, good to have you here. Can you hear Timmy snoring? Quite cute. Okay. Special Agent Harris asks Barry about the timing of when he left because he is saying 5, but he had looked at earlier times on the sheet he was shown and that we are trying to make sense of marks in time. This is kind of a reference to the metadata. Barry interrupted and said, I don't know. I don't know exactly the time. I just know it was around 5 o'clock, but I don't know exactly. Do you guys know what time Barry left? I think he set his alarm for something like 4:27 or something, or the alarm was apparently set for around 4:30. Do you know what time his truck actually left the residence? Does anybody know the answer to that? Thanks, Aeneas. Am I saying your name right? Does anyone know what time Barry left the residence based on the kind of the metadata? Zenaida says, sorry guys, sorry, I'm late, we'll listen to replay. 2 Dog Night, 2:30 a.m. No, it's not 2:30. Mo Rama says a little after 5:30. Mel Stiller says, if I'm not mistaken, Barry left the house around 5 a.m. Teresa says it was after around 5 a.m., I think. Okay. I was under the impression it was 4 something, but I could be wrong. But anyway, it was early. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry when he sees the lump, was it him seeing just covers or some of the covers with Suzanne? I would just say when I hear, again, it's the language technician in me, when I see the word that is used to describe the last time Barry sees Suzanne, I see all sorts of different possibilities in my mind. I mean, they could be irrelevant. They could be, they could have some significance. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But to reduce a person to a lump. You know, a lump is something, I'm just wondering how to say this in a way that's not sort of gratuitous or overly disturbing, but how can I put it? What I'm trying to say is when a person is sitting on a couch or lying on a bed, I don't know if you describe them as a lump. I think you describe them as, I don't know if maybe would you describe them as a heap, but you would kind of, I don't know if you would describe them in such a way. And what I just can't help seeing in my mind is if someone is changed from someone with arms and shoulders and limbs and so on to a lump, doesn't that suggest that they've almost been converted from the physical form to a lump? Do you get what I'm trying to say? It just seems to me an odd word to be using, which, as I say, maybe it's not odd, but it just seems a very almost, I don't know, it's a very strange word to be using to describe a person. It's insulting to call someone a lump, you know. It's not like she was overweight or always lying around somewhere. And he's describing her as kind of a lump on a blanket in a way. Do you get what I'm saying? And I'm just wondering whether that isn't true, whether she had been reduced in some way to kind of a lump, if that makes sense. Do you know what I'm getting at? And that's one of the things, again, you want to write a little note on a post-it and put aside, and we'll revisit that again. Bear in mind, her remains were never found. Does that have something to do with her becoming a lump, changed into a lump? Barry said, and this is his response to that. So Barry's asked, you saw a lump, or were you seeing covers, or where did the covers end and the lump begin? What did you see? And it's quite interesting that the agents want to focus on this issue. And this is Barry's answer. He said, like I said, I don't recall specifically looking at her. I just know she was there. Now, I want you to think about this as well. Imagine the reality of the scenario, that Suzanne is no longer Suzanne anymore. She's been changed in some way. And I agree it's a horrible thing to even contemplate. But in terms of our analysis here, think about what we are talking about. Barry says, I don't recall looking specifically at her. Now, if someone is no longer in their physical form, someone is no longer a person, you can't specifically look at them. There's not a face anymore. There's not eyes. They've now become a lump. And then he also says, I just know she was there. In other words, you know, if you think about human remains, like if someone was buried somewhere 100 years ago, you would also say, I just know that they're there. You know, in other words, the remains may have almost completely disappeared, but I just know that they're there. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So all I'm trying to put into your mind is for you to imagine this lump in a way that is a little bit different. And Barry then saying, I don't recall specifically looking at her. I just know she was there. Maybe more from the noise than seeing her, but I know I saw her there. No doubt in my mind. 100% she was laying right there when I left. Special Agent Grissing tells Barry that investigators are still waiting for some things like a Range Rover, and that things like this don't end, and that we are waiting for snow to melt to look at a few places. Special Agent Grussing asked Barry to call if he has anything else that comes to mind, and we will talk. Barry said, have I been cooperative with you guys? Special Agent Grussing says he has. I don't know if you caught that. There was just a slight hiccup. Fortunately, it's slight. Any more than that, that's really going to hurt. Barry said, any guy in his right mind that knows anything about the legal system would tell you not to talk. Timmy's not a snoring lump, that's true. Special Agent Grussing interrupts Barry to say that he hears Barry, but fathers or spouses of people who go missing typically can't be stopped from calling the FBI. Special Agent Grussing told Barry if he's guilty, he's correct, that he should not be talking to us. Barry said, yeah. It's a kind of a similar situation with Agent Tammy Lee saying, if you're guilty, you really shouldn't be talking to us. You shouldn't be doing this lie detector. And by the way, that comes up in this particular interview. Barry's asked about the lie detector. So Barry's response to that is, yeah. And that brings me to something I just want to raise with you guys. To me, do you guys agree that Barry is a hunter? Right? Barry's a hunter. And what do you think is actually taking place with many of these discussions? Let me say that again. Barry's a hunter. And what you typically have with a hunter is the hunter he either has or he wants to have better intel than his prey. So in other words, the hunter sees the prey before the prey sees him. The hunter has a strategy for catching the prey, which is, well, you are slightly moving in that direction. Well, you don't know where I am. You don't know that I'm watching you. So I'm going to follow you until I get to this point, right? Do you see what I'm saying? And then you make use of things like camouflage, opportunism, strategy, but a lot of it's got to do with the hunter knows something that the hunter doesn't know, right? Do you follow me? Just look at some of your comments here. Robbie Robin says he's competitive. Thought Criminal says hunting for details of the investigators. So Bria says strategizing. Now consider the following. That is the prototypical scenario of a classic hunter or classic hunting scenario. The hunter has the edge, the hunter knows more, the hunter sees the hunted, the hunter sees the prey doesn't see the hunter has the edge, the hunter knows more. Do you follow what I'm saying? Now let me ask you a different question. Barry is the hunter. Do you think Barry has that same edge in this scenario? In other words, in this scenario where he's talking to the interview to the FBI, where do you think where Barry's talking to these agents, it's a similar situation where the hunter has everything exactly where he wants it? Mel Stiller says the hunter knows both the prey and the terrain. Kimberly says, thank you for your kind words. I'm having my last surgery in May. Good luck for that surgery. Yvonne says the hunter is now the hunted, but he knows the game. Two Dog Knight says trap, snares, bait. Robbie says no, he's the vulnerable one. So what I'm trying to take you to is this idea of Barry's the hunter. He's used to having that intelligence, that insight. Bear in mind, he uses cameras, he uses scopes and other means for surveillance, right? do you think that the agents aren't hunters of a certain type themselves? Do you think that what the agents are doing doesn't make them hunters as well? Are they also not doing a kind of surveillance? Are they also not doing a kind of aren't they also applying a strategy? Let's look at what you're saying. Gid says he's trying to outsmart them. Someone says Barry's not smart enough to outsmart the agents. Now, bear in mind, what is easy to miss here is Barry's not talking to one agent, he's talking to two agents. So while Barry's talking to one agent, another agent may be recording things, making notes, preparing the next question. It's two minds against one mind, right? And it's easy to miss that. You had that with Chris Watts and the two agents talking to him as well. Teresa says they are doing a dance with Barry. So what I want you to think about is these agents are hunters as well, and they are hunters of men and maybe women sometimes. But their job is to pursue suspects and catch them. And, right, their job is to hunt human beings, not obviously with weapons, but with words and with psychology and strategy, right? And in a scenario where someone commits a crime, right, they are kind of new. Maybe they've hunted, let's say we're not talking about Barry. Let's say there's another hunter called Fred. And Fred is hunted, and he's a fantastic hunter, and he's hunted chipmunks and squirrels and bears and whatever. And Fred has taken the step of hunting or killing a person. You might say he's very experienced. Well, I can tell you now he's not. He's not experienced at the very unique territory that is true crime. All of the things getting involved with that. So, for example, when you hunt an animal, afterwards you don't need to go and hide away the weapons that you used. You don't need to explain to someone where you were and all that kind of thing. It's totally different to when you hunt a person, right? The details are far more important when a person is either hunted or a victim of being hunted, right? And you can use a different word. You can say murdered, killed, but hunted is, you know what I'm talking about. And so in a scenario where you've got law enforcement who have dealt with this over and over again, people who have they've regularly been in a situation of different people who've done similar things, right? So their experience as hunters of criminals is at a very, very high level. That they're used to the tricks, they're used to the deceits. And yeah, you have a hunter who thinks that he's very well versed in all of that stuff, the subterfuge and so on. And so I'm just saying the question is, who do you think is actually the hunter in this dynamic? In these interviews between Grussing, Harris, and Barry, who do you think is actually the hunter here, and who do you think is the hunted in the reality of it? Who do you think is being outfoxed here? Just something to consider. So Special Agent Grussing says if Barry wants to find Suzanne, he shouldn't hesitate to call or anything that comes to mind. Barry says, and I want that. I mean, I still love her, even though I found all this stuff out, and even though it hurts me to the bone. Also an interesting statement, it hurts me to the bone. It doesn't mean I don't love her. I want her back, and then he cuts himself off. He says, I know she made a mistake. I know it's not her. And I know that if she got right with the Lord, that she would ask for forgiveness from him and me. Barry added, this is hard on his daughters and he wants Suzanne back. Now, what I find quite interesting with this is, do you remember previously it said that he's selling everything, he's getting out of town, that if she did come back, he would have nothing to do with her. Now, you've got to be careful. With some people, there is a certain amount of, I don't want to say slippage, but it's a certain amount of variety to how we feel. If I take myself, I had an injury, and what I said yesterday is a little bit different to today. Yesterday, I was in a situation where I think I was quite optimistic and hopeful. Today, I'm less optimistic. Does that mean I'm lying? Does that mean that I lied yesterday or I'm lying today? So what I'm trying to say is there's a certain amount of natural variation in our knowledge base where what we know and what we feel may vary naturally based on just the passage of time. And it's important not to confuse that natural variability with something that is very different to that, where your psychology changes. In other words, if I'd said to you yesterday that I feel completely fine, I can't believe it, I'm absolutely pain-free, and then the next day, oh, I've got cracked ribs, that would be a bit of a mismatch. It's too much of a mismatch for both to be true. Does that make sense? So psychologically, where he says he wants her back and all of that, that doesn't really match what he said earlier, and also about that this was God's work, right? Anyway, Special Agent Grissing asked Barry if he remembers what he said when he first met with agents and what he said about Hillary and Comey. Barry said, I probably said something about Comey's a liar, and he's at the very top of the FBI and he's a liar. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry if he remembered what he said about how he knew Comey was lying. When he said certain things, Barry said no. Now, I don't know exactly what they're getting at here, but it seems like instead of saying to Barry, we don't believe you that you want Suzanne back, in other words, they don't say, Barry, that's not what you said earlier. They kind of do it, and I'm speculating here. I'm assuming that this is their strategy. The way they seem to be communicating this is indirectly. They say, do you know when you say I don't recall, that's indicative that you're lying. So in a weird way, they seem to be saying, reminding Barry of that, and through that, Barry might join the dots that they think he could be lying, and then maybe he's going to change what he's saying. In other words, it's a very indirect way of saying, are you sure? Are you telling us the truth? They're putting that ball in Barry's court, so to speak. In any event, what is quite interesting is they say, Barry told agents, let me just read it here. Special Agent Grissing reminded Barry that he said, when Comey said, I don't recall, and that is what both Hillary and Comey would say, and that is what Barry told agents indicated that they were lying. And that brings us to footnote 83. By this point in the audit, Barry had replied, I don't recall so many times to the audit questions that the agents lost counts. It's absolutely true. I actually think it is important to count Barry's I don't recall. If I was the prosecutor, I would say, Judge, or whatever, to the jury, in this actual audit, Barry said, I don't recall 57 times or whatever it is. It is a heck of a lot of I don't recalls. I've dealt with a lot of these things, these statements, and I don't recall can sometimes come up half a dozen times, a dozen times. It comes up a heck of a lot with Barry. I don't recall comes up quite a lot with the Ramseys, where you think, wow, it seems like quite a guarded legal response there, but nowhere near this amount. Anyway, going back to the affidavit narrative, Barry said now he's asked to respond to this assertion. about I don't recall. And you almost think, having been reminded of it, Barry's never going to say I don't recall again. But Barry's just, in a way, anyway, Barry said, yeah, well, and then he paused. He said, I just don't trust the whole thing about Comey and Hillary. So, I mean, I don't know if you're just trying to twist that around and put it on me. But when I tell you I don't recall something, I don't recall it. I find his words here quite interesting. You're trying to twist that around and put it on me. I just find that quite an interesting thing. I wonder whether he thought that about Suzanne, because there's a situation where who's having the affair, who's in Afrikaans there's a saying, die vark in die verhaal, means the pig in the story. Who's the real pig in the story between Suzanne and Barry? And so, anyway, when he says, you're trying to twist that around and put it on me, it's just interesting to think about that. Okay, so now we go to page 117. I want to try and go through this fairly quickly. Special Agent Grussing says, okay. Barry said, it's not that I'm lying. There's nothing in every question you guys asked me, there's nothing that I had to lie about. Special Agent Grussing said agents didn't know it was a subtle way of Barry telling us that. So it's almost like they're playing mind games with Barry. They're sort of saying, were you kind of indirectly telling us that you're not telling the truth? It's a kind of a funny way that they're doing this. They seem to be prodding Barry, trying to kind of light a cracker under his chair. And so Barry responds, no, absolutely not. If I told you guys that I don't recall something, then I didn't recall it. The reason I said that about Jim Comey is because I heard the questions they were asking him, and there's no way in heck he couldn't recall that. There's no way. Special Agent Grussing tells Barry that he might not believe this, but he doesn't pay attention to the things that happen in DC, because that is not why someone signs up for the FBI. Special Agent Grussing, so a little bit of possible buttering up. We're not on that person's side, and don't worry, whatever. So anyways, it tells Barry he hopes that people can see that that is not who we are. So it's kind of like, Barry, we on your side, Barry, we your friends. A little bit like Agent Coder and Chris Watts. Barry says that he sees Special Agent Grussing and Special Agent Harris as two men of integrity and honest, God-fearing men, and then he said that he hopes agents would see him in the same light, because Barry thinks us three are a lot alike. So there's this weird camaraderie between these guys basically that's sort of been verbalized here, basically just before Barry's arrest, right? 2 weeks before his arrest. Again, I want you to think about who's the real hunter in the story. Who's hunting who? Who thinks that they've got the edge on the others, right? Something that the defense might use is they might say that Barry was manipulated, that Barry was conned, that that the agents misrepresented themselves in a certain way. So in terms of this particular area, which, as I say, the agents seem to be buttering Barry up a little bit, the defense might say, the defense might try and emphasize these agents as duplicitous, these agents as, how can I put it, double dealing, dishonest. In other words, law enforcement must get information by being completely honest, and a suspect can lie and cheat and whatever as much as they want, but law enforcement, they may not use the same tactics. They may not be manipulative, right? I find that a little bit naive. I think everybody knows there's a little bit of strategy when there's interrogating, and after all, what is the difference between a law enforcement person being somewhat manipulative, getting a confession from a murderer, and a murderer who's telling lies, who gets caught out and then in other words, please don't elevate being a somewhat manipulative as an interrogator with the crime that the person they are interrogating. It's not on the same level. You can't say, you know what, the real crime here is that guy was a bit fuzzy on those details. That's the real crime here. No, that's not the real crime here. The real crime here is what happened to Suzanne and who did it, right? But I can imagine this is going to be, there's going to be a big thing about the agents not being absolutely straight as an arrow in terms of this particular aspect. The other thing that I think is worth considering is, do you remember one of the charges against Barry was influencing officials? Something about that he seemed to be influencing folks in law enforcement. I'm not sure if it was the CBI or who it was, but he seemed to be doing that. Is he doing that with these agents? Was he subtly asking them or kind of bargaining with them? Or is it with interrogations we haven't actually seen yet? Just an interesting question. I think it's something that we need to address the question and also get the answer to. Special Agent Grussing says that we all make mistakes as well, and that is why agents want to leave room for Barry to talk about anything, including something he thinks might make him look bad. But he hopes agents are the type of people Barry could tell that to. And so Barry says, you are the kind of guys that I would feel comfortable talking about my mistakes to, right? Once again, I want you to think about this idea of who is the hunter in this little dynamic, who is really got the edge on the other, which one is closing in on the other, right? Special Agent Grussing asked if Barry would show agents the pin on his Bobcat he was repairing on Saturday. So yeah, you kind of have a little bit of a change in tack, a change in the tone, a change in the whole direction of the interview. Barry's just said, you guys are great, whatever, and now they say, oh, can you show us the pin on your Bobcat, right? And apparently he was repairing this on Saturday. So according to Barry, with everything going on the Saturday that Suzanne disappeared, he was also repairing the pin. So the agents and Barry start to walk back over to the Bobcat. This is a really amazing scene, just for the detail and for the timing of it as well. As I say, bear in mind, Barry was arrested 2 weeks later. So you can actually see photos in black and white on the affidavit of this moment. Barry's still got his hands in his pockets. He's wearing like a plaid shirt. You see the Bobcat to one side of the image. The photos are all taken at quite a low angle. Barry's wearing dark glasses and they're standing next to the Bobcat and just sort of talking about it. Do you guys want to? It's just a little bit difficult to move. Shall I just turn this around? I'm going to have to unplug it. Okay. So that's what we're talking about. Okay. Seems a bit skew now. Is that better? Okay, so yeah, they are standing besides the Bobcat, which it's a piece of equipment Barry uses for landscaping, I guess to some extent construction. So this is the part that's really interesting. While walking, Barry says, so as of now, I'm not going to get anything of mine back. Special Agent Grissing said that is not up to the agent. Special Agent Grissing asked Barry, what's most important? What's the most important thing you want back? Barry said, the guns are the most important and my cameras. Just look at some of your questions. Mo Rama says he can't remember anything about the Bobcat that day. Mr. Deja Vu King, if Barry has a great law team, they'll destroy the prosecution, especially the bike that the cop moved. That evidence is destroyed. Well, I don't know about that. If you imagine that the bike is staged, then it's a little bit like it's a false evidence. So even if the evidence is destroyed, it's a distraction anyway. But I guess you could make a big stink about the bike over and over again and try and focus attention on that. Bria says they don't have the body or any concrete evidence, but there seems to be a load of circumstantial evidence. Mel says, Nick, please don't make yourself uncomfortable for our sakes. I'm fairly comfortable right now. Fatica says he probably buried Suzanne with that Bobcat. That's the question. The question is, was the Bobcat part of the crime scene fabric? And think about what it is. It's something that moves earth. It's something that can be used to open holes in the earth and close holes in the earth. It's something that can be used to carry something. It's something that can be used to tear something apart. I'm not sure how much they crush rocks or something. I'm not sure to what extent Bobcats are used for that. But that's the question. And I think that's the question law enforcement also have. So that is the question, is the Bobcat relevant here? So this is what happens next. Special Agent Grissing asks about the pin on the Bobcat. Barry points to a pin on the back right arm of the Bobcat and says that he didn't even realize that the nut has come off of a bolt that is there. Barry states that when the Bobcat arm goes up and down, the pin works its way out one way or the other, and he has just had to beat it back into place because it holds the cylinder in place. Special Agent Grissing asks if Barry can do that on his own and doesn't need help. Barry confirms that he can. What this could be implying is that the Bobcat, and this is just speculation, that the Bobcat was doing something unusual on Saturday and this damaged this pin. I'm just saying it's possible. Whether you could prove that, I don't think you could easily prove that. I guess you'd have to ask Barry's colleagues what they knew about the pin. I'm just saying that should be a question to raise and to try and answer as far as possible. This part is really interesting. Barry confirms that he can sort that out, and then Barry starts talking about the cutting blade of the Bobcat and walks around to show agents, as he describes, how it has a cutting edge on both sides and can be flipped, and that when Cribb had to replace his blade, it had already been flipped and both edges were worn out. Barry said he thinks that Trent had that blade and gave it to CBI. I'm also not completely clear on this, but as far as I know, the Bobcat blade was replaced very close to the time that Suzanne disappeared. Why are you putting kind of a sharp blade onto your Bobcat then? Again, is this relevant or isn't it? Barry, okay, so then So the other thing that I want to draw your attention to is, let me just ask it as a question rather than telling you what I know. So I'm going to ask you two questions. The first question is, where, let me ask it this way. Did cadaver dogs alert anywhere in this investigation? Answer yes or no. Did cadaver dogs alert anywhere in this investigation? Answer yes or no. Mo Rama says yes on the seat. Two Dog Knight says no. Rebecca Hanna says yes. Christine Lowry, no. Jean Carroll says yes. Yvonne Phillips says yes. Jules of Thought says yes, down at the river and then by a tree at the subdivision. Git says yes. Robbie Robbins says not sure. Quite a lot of deviation from you guys. Quite a few say yes, quite a few say no, quite a few say you don't know. Mel Stiller says I don't know. Teresa says I don't think so. Karina asked by the river. Jane's World 2 says yes on the Bobcat blade for 1. Okay. So I'm a little bit rusty. I haven't read, I've read through the affidavit, but the part dealing with cadaver traces was been quite a while ago. From my understanding, from my initial reading, there were cadaver traces found. So the answer to that is yes. I'm talking about cadaver traces mentioned in the affidavit. I'm not talking about what someone else thought they found or in other searches or what was said in the news. I'm talking about the affidavit. So what law enforcement are saying they found, right? Patricia Burns says the bike is not evidence. Are you okay? Are you doing okay, Patricia? Mel Stiller says yes, and then on the Bobcat question mark. Fatica says I used Bobcats. Changing blades is rare. Very good point. Okay, so in terms of the first question, did the cadaver dogs alert? The answer is yes. Where did the cadaver dogs alert? What would you say if I told you that the alert was related to the Bobcat? Okay, so I'm not going to go further into that. That's kind of a different area. That's the evidence. But we'll certainly look at, as far as I remember, there were 3 cadaver dogs. And it wasn't just one alert. They were confirmed alerts, as I understand it. It seemed to be related to the Bobcat. And I'll tell you exactly what they say, but we'll deal with that when we deal with the evidence. I've seen quite a few of you talking about rocks by the river and so on. I'm talking about the cadaver dog alerts that are mentioned in the affidavit. So it's quite important to, that's kind of the version that's going to be fielded in court if it goes to court. So just be aware of kind of, you might say, I think it happened there and there and there and there. It's a specific question. You've got to have a specific answer and you've got to, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's just something we're going to deal with later on. Faticus asks, the Bobcat is the key, question mark. That is the question. That is a question. Cindy, aka Skinny, joining from Austin, Texas. Please don't make me laugh too much. I've got some cracked ribs. For real. Joan Kelly says, I'm sorry, my internet is being stupid. I don't get to hear everything being said. Just refresh your screen if that's happening. Robbie Robbins says, human cadaver only. Well, cadaver dogs are only alert to human cadavers. But because we're talking about a hunter and animals, I guess that is a good question. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Let's go back to the affidavit. Other topics covered in the audit included Barry's purchase of the VPN, Barry deleting calls from his call logs, why Barry initially thought his big argument with Suzanne was on Friday, evidence through Libler messages of other arguments daily that week, how long Suzanne was distant and unloving, if Barry and Suzanne were separate on Wednesday and Friday evenings based on their cell phones, discrepancies in his calls to Gene Moorman, that's Suzanne's father, evidence pointing to Barry sending the Facebook friend requests on Friday night, Barry's phone functions involving passwords, token sharing, and group functions, and the multiple airplane mode functions on Barry's phone. So this is really glossed through. They don't really deal with this. It's just one paragraph just glossing through all of this. And so obviously the part we're dealing with now, they think is quite important. And this is on page 118. Barry was shown, this is something I've also highlighted and put a big arrow here. It seems to be quite significant. Barry was shown Google Maps of his residence and his phone activity on Saturday, May 9th, when he arrived home between 11:30 and left at 1:38 p.m. So bear in mind, Barry left, came back, and then left again and came back again. When shown location points that his truck may not have pulled in the driveway, and he appeared to be coming up through the woods on foot to his house, Barry said he might have been looking at turkeys. So there's a strange scenario here that we've been talking quite a lot about May 9th. We've been talking quite a lot about May 9th, the afternoon, as a part of the timeline that we feel is crucial. We know that the FBI seem to think that's potentially the last proof of life, right? Is that a bit more level? Okay. So do you guys agree? May 9th, the afternoon, sort of mid-afternoon, is crucial to the timeline. And so that's where they're touching on again. And they say when he arrived home between 11:30 and 1:38, he seemed to be coming up through the woods on foot to his own home. Why was he doing that? Right? So he arrives home in his truck, but he doesn't pull up on the driveway. Instead, he comes through the woods and on foot. And so they ask him what was going on with that. And Barry doesn't say, no, I did drive up to my garage. I did drive up the driveway. He says, I might have been looking at turkeys. so just to bring up what I said again, there's this reference to chipmunks, there's a reference to deer, now we have a reference to turkeys. As I said, turkey is something that you kind of put in the oven and it slowly bakes, it sort of changes color, but it's sort of like, it's not a sitting duck, but it basically sits there and it changes color, right? It burns as it cooks as the oven does its thing. And one wonders whether there's any kind of, is there any psychological link? Is there anything going on with his wife suntanning and him saying he was looking at turkeys? Yes or no? It's just a question. Anyway, so Barry was shown a second map of his movements, but from 11:52 a.m. This is quite direct, quite what's the word? It's narrowing the timeline. It's about 40 minutes from 11:52 a.m. to 12:31 p.m. when he appeared to head east of his property during the time he was supposedly having veggie soup with Suzanne. So when he was supposedly having lunch, he seemed to be heading east of his property. And so again, Barry said he was looking for a turkey that he had shot previously with a bow, but that they had never found. So suddenly Barry wants to find, on the same day that Barry is running after chipmunks, he's also running after turkeys. And around about the same time, he's also looking at deer, right? So there's quite a lot of that going on. During the crucial part of the timeline fabric, or what appears to be the crucial part of it, Barry seems to be running around after chipmunks, turkeys, and deer. Barry was shown a third map where it looked like he was on foot, heading back to his truck before he left at 1:38 p.m. and called Suzanne at 1:47 p.m. and 1:49 p.m. So around about 9, 10, 11 minutes after he left. So he'd been at that location and then he called her to say something. Barry said it made sense that he did not talk to Suzanne much during that lunch hour as a reason for him calling her twice when he got to Highway 50. So that's quite interesting. His phone's not in airplane mode at this point. One wonders, did he forget something? Is there an innocent explanation? Or is Barry actually trying to timestamp, at this time, Suzanne's here and I'm there. At this time, I'm calling Suzanne and she's there and I'm here, kind of thing, right? It's 2 calls separated by 2 minutes. The other thing that I think is interesting is, I don't know why they don't ask him, maybe they did, but they don't mention it here. What was that call about? Why did you call and call back? What was that about? I don't know whether it was asked, maybe said, I don't recall, but it's not brought up here. I would want to know what was so important to call back about at that time. But it is interesting that almost 10 minutes later, he makes that call. 10 minutes is enough time to get quite a lot of distance and to say, oh, that's where I was on Saturday. I wasn't at home, I was somewhere else, kind of thing. I called from blah, 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 right? I'm just saying, could that be relevant here? Or is there just a completely straightforward explanation that it's like, do you need me to get this from the store, whatever? But he was asked, why did you call twice? And he said the reason was we didn't really talk much when we were at home. So he was at home during the lunch hour on the Saturday, and they didn't really say much to one another. Okay. On the other hand, if Barry was, some of you seem to be wondering, could he have been spying on her? Could he have been watching her, well, then he wouldn't have spoken to her either. So maybe there's an element of truth in that. Who knows? Anyway, so he got onto Highway 50. Barry was asked the following and shown exhibits. Regarding his trip to get a backhoe on Saturday, May 9th. So this is also quite significant. We've already spoken about the Bobcat. I've got to admit, I'm not 100% about this particular aspect. I have Googled a backhoe. A backhoe is kind of like an arm with like a spade, right? That you sometimes have at the back of sort of construction equipment. Now, I don't know whether the backhoe was at the back of the Bobcat. I don't know if the backhoe is at the back of the Bobcat or if the backhoe is something completely different. I'm just not sure. As far as I know, you can have a Bobcat with a backhoe at the back of it. It's like this thing that goes like this, and you can kind of dig from the backside of the of your construction earth moving equipment. Let's just see what some of you guys say. Touche, good to see you here. Jean says, I recall that he owned 2 Bobcats, one without GPS. Anyone know? Mel Stiller says, when alibis are required, defendants do all they can to create them. That's right, Yvonne, it does look like a giant claw. So I'm just not sure whether the backhoe is something that he got to attach to the Bobcat or whether it's a separate thing. I'm not quite sure about that. Anyway, so he says, regarding his trip to get a backhoe on Saturday, May 9th, and why he needed a backhoe that day, where the towel Suzanne was lying in her last photo on might be located, and it was not recovered at the house. Why Barry texted Suzanne, did you leave, as he headed home at 2:31 p.m. More details about the chipmunk gun, when he mounted the scope. Well, it looks like they're just ticking through all the things they spoke about. Suzanne's reaction to him shooting, when the Foose's hike occurred, details of his last meal with Suzanne, whether Barry unplugged his router or threw away surveillance components, his purchase and disposal of the mini camera, his cleaning of the workbench. This I've actually highlighted. It's quite interesting that he didn't only clean out his truck on Mother's Day. It seems like he cleaned his workbench prior to his trip to Broomfield. I just find that a very interesting admission. Then it says his movements through Saturday night and Sunday morning, when he last saw Suzanne's phone, items thrown away in trash runs in Broomfield, proof that he was not at the wall when he received the call from the Ritters, that's the neighbors, and staging of the tools in the hotel. It's interesting that they use the word staging here. Staging of the tools in the hotel. So it seems like they're just saying here that Barry was asked about all of these things. Why did you get the backhoe? Why did you need it that day? Why did you clean the workbench and so on? So they don't really go into much detail here. I don't know whether that's because there's nothing to report or they don't want to reveal too much in terms of the affidavit. I don't know. I don't quite know. I presume it's there in order to expand upon later. I don't know. Regarding the photo of Barry pushing the trash to the bottom of the McDonald's trash can, he said the photo makes it look like he was disposing of evidence. He said he could not recall what items he threw away. Now we go to page 119. And these I put some big arrows next to as well. When asked about the folders that were burned in his fireplace, he said he and Suzanne were cleaning out file cabinets that week. Interesting. So when all of this is going on, I'm also burning documents in my fireplace. Okay. Barry was shown a map of Garfield, Colorado, and he confirmed he turned around on Sunday, May 10th, at the first place he could have, pointing to exit 228. So in this respect, we go to footnote 84, and it reads, Barry pointed to this as a possible turnaround point, though he stated, I don't recall numerous times. So Barry seems to be uncertain where he actually drove in the beginning of his trip to Broomfield. He seems to be unclear of the route he took kind of immediately after leaving home on his way to Broomfield. That seems to be what they're saying. Barry said he did not climb that road leading up into the mountains, nor did he go into any of the mines. He said George and his buddies searched those mine shafts for Suzanne. They're saying that he searched for his wife in mine shafts. When asked about Suzanne's leather journal that was not recovered, he said he did not recall, that's again in inverted commas, that she had one. Fancy that. Fancy law enforcement asking about a leather journal and Barry saying, I don't recall that she had one. Just that alone is kind of quite interesting. In other words, did she have one or didn't she? And who said that she did have one? And as far as I know, Suzanne always had 3 books next to one another. I think one was the Bible. Another could have been this leather journal. And then there was another book, I think, as well. Right? Let's look at some of your comments. Terry Dean is here. Just Terry Dean's birthday yesterday. I hope you had a good one. Mel Stiller says we need to remember that construction work is not allowed in that area on weekends. The Al-Anon book, that's it. Thanks for filling that one. And I thought of, could it be something to do with that? But I thought I'm not sure, so I'm not going to mention it. But that was the third one. Okay, so Barry was told that Suzanne confided, this is also quite interesting. Barry was told that Suzanne confided in friends that sex with him was not pleasurable. So she's told her friends, I'm not really enjoying it. Then reminded that he put sex as the top reason on his victimology questionnaire. Bear in mind, in the previous live stream we did, dealing with the previous 10 pages, they also asked Barry, did anything change in terms of your sexual experience? Was there any moment where there was a sort of a difference to it? And Barry said, no, it was always great. And so it seems to show that they knew, they had knowledge of what Suzanne had apparently told friends. And so, again, one's got to wonder, is Barry telling the truth, or is the perception or what is related to the friends or what the friends remembered, is there some error there, right? But there's, once again, inconsistency. He was reminded that he put sex as the top reason on his victimology questionnaire for someone's motive for a disappearance. I also find that quite just like eyebrow raising. Barry's asked, what do you think's the motive for Suzanne's disappearance? And he writes sex. And then he changes that now by saying, oh, hang on. He said that rather than sex not being pleasurable from Suzanne's perspective, he says she had an orgasm every time, so I don't understand that. I don't know, I kind of get the idea Barry has I don't know if the word shallow or superficial or simple or basic. I don't really know what the word is, but he seems to have a simple, and not a very sophisticated way of thinking about certain emotions and certain complicated human dynamics. I mean, it's almost like reducing. In other words, when he's questioned about, was their sex life satisfying, the way he addresses that is, he says she had an orgasm every time. It's, it certainly makes Barry seem like a stud muffin. Was he? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It seems a bit oversimplistic. And I don't just mean in this instance, but anyway, Barry said he should have listed rape instead of sex on the questionnaire as a motivator for a disappearance because he thought of some creep trying to rape her. If you think of that scenario, some creep trying to rape her, doesn't that conjure this idea of someone who's stalking her in order to attack her and hurt her? So it's this idea of some creep who's sort of hanging around, who's lurking around. I'm just saying those words, some creep trying to rape her, doesn't that conjure this idea also of her being hunted? Barry was told by Special Agent Harris that the needle sheath for the tranquilizer was found in the dryer. Barry said he had no idea how it got there, and he said it's got nothing to do with me. And he said, I hate that because, that makes me look bad. And so it's kind of weird. I mean, if the needle sheath is found in the dryer and it doesn't have anything to do with him, who does it have something to do with? Who else was hunting? Who else was using tranquilizer darts? It just seems like a bit of a simple way of saying, it wasn't me. Okay, but how did that happen? Next paragraph, Special Agent Grussing asked Barry if he shot the tranquilizer gun on Saturday, May 9th, and he said, absolutely not. Barry was told no tranquilizer like BAM was recovered at the house. This is quite interesting. No tranquilizer like BAM was actually found at the house, but Barry said he used BAM, telazol, and xylazine as tranquilizers. When Barry was asked if he disposed of those, he said, I don't recall. That's pretty incredible. He's asked, did you dispose of these tranquilizers? He doesn't say, no, I didn't. He says, I don't remember. Barry can be very clear and unambiguous where he will say, absolutely not, 100% this, 100% that. Well, now it's quite a critical thing. Did you dispose of tranquilizers? I don't recall. Barry was asked what he used to reverse the tranquilizer effect. Remember, this came up previously, right? This came up in the previous 10 pages in part 2. He was asked what he used to reverse the tranquilizer effect, and he said tolazine. Now, do you remember what he said previously when he was asked? Do you remember what he said during that occasion? I just want to see if you guys remember that. Okay, I'm just looking to see Sharon Butler, coroner. Someone says that if he says absolutely not and I can't recall, or I don't recall, they are red flags. What I'm looking for is, he actually said he had no idea. He said, I don't know what drug you would use to reverse the effect. He said, he could find out, right? And now he knows what it is in this interview. So I think it was April 5th, April 5th, now it's April 22nd. Now you can actually identify the drug that reverses the effect, right? And he says it's tolazine, and Barry said he brought the chemicals which he knew to be controlled substances from Indiana and kept them on his workbench. Remember, he also said he cleaned the workbench. Do I need to stress what has been asserted here? I mean, right next to this, I wrote a big wow in the affidavit, right? So first of all, he's acknowledging that he's got the agent to reverse the tranquilizer, right? He's also not saying that he didn't throw away the tranquilizer stuff. He says, I just don't remember if I didn't. And he's also saying that he brought these controlled substances, these chemicals that reverse the tranquilizer from Indiana. So he's had them for quite a while. And he also says that he kept them on his workbench. He also told us that he cleaned his workbench. And what I've speculated on is it possible that Suzanne was shot with a tranquilizer dart, immobilized, and then actually brought back to consciousness, but by that time she was kind of restrained, right? Bear in mind there's a 3-hour gap, and that came up in the previous analysis where Barry couldn't account for what happened for 3 hours, approximately from 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. on April 9th. Let's look at some of your points here. You see how chemicals seem to be quite a big, the chemicals seem to be something that Barry knows a lot about. He seems to be very clued up on chemicals. And then there's also this idea of, were there chemicals at the hotel room, chlorine, you know. Jules of Thought says a veterinarian testified there was enough of the tranquilizer to cause death by asphyxiation. That's why the comment on snoring was important. That's quite an interesting point, is bear in mind these tranquilizers are actually supposed to be used on animals. And so you could accidentally, inadvertently, whatever, kill a person that you've shot with this tranquilizer dart. And maybe what you want to do it's not the murder weapon. Maybe what you want to do with a tranquilizer dart is subdue someone for a particular purpose. What could that purpose be? One purpose could be so that you could actually look at what's on their phone. Another one is that you could talk to them, I guess, but in a position of a certain kind of position in terms of your power versus their power. If you get my drift. But anyway, it's just pretty interesting what law enforcement seem to be thinking about this, and how much attention they're paying attention, how much attention they're giving to this. Not there yet says, in hunting and landscaping, you would know about chemicals. I don't know if that's really true. I don't know if all hunters know about chemicals. I think you get hunters who use guns and they know about guns. I don't know if they necessarily know about chemicals. Nisi says if she was subdued, one's got to wonder, was there sadism involved here? To me, there is, how can I put it? I'm probably going to offend some people by saying this, but I think there's a sadistic element to certain things like hunting and fishing and shooting things. I think there's a sadistic element of, I benefit at your expense, obviously in terms of animals. In the same way, I think no matter what crime is being committed, there's also an element of sadism as well. I steal from you, I'm cleverer than you, I took what you have, I have it now, you don't, and you don't know. But there can be certain levels of sadism that are sort of low. So, for example, someone fishing, here I am, I'm enjoying myself on a fishing boat, and it's a nice day out, and I'm having a beer. But actually, what's happening is I've got a hook in the water, it's got a little piece of bait on it, and a fish that is just swimming around, actually going to get, a hook through its mouth, and its body weight is going to be dragged through the water. And this is something that is fun for the fisherman. Now, you might say you're overthinking that, and it's not nearly as bad as that, but I'm just saying there's an element in it that is kind of ruthless, and right. And you get certain kind of hunters that want to make the challenge more this way or that way. But at the same time, I think it adds an element of sadism as well to the whole thing, right? Enjoyment in suffering. And I'm certainly not trying to say something like, I'm better than a hunter, for example. I mean, I think me going on this mountain bike ride, there's an element of sadism there as well, where you do literally enjoy the suffering. I wouldn't say you enjoy the suffering, you endure the suffering, and you enjoy the achievement at the end of it. And it might be something similar with hunters. There's a picture I put on Instagram literally showing off this injury. And you could say that is, maybe there's a different word for it, but there's something maybe sadistic about that, bragging about your injury. I mean, it's almost, you get what I'm saying? But I'm just saying there's an element to that is almost normal, almost healthy, but you can get that element where it's really unhealthy, where there's this really sadistic side where I'm smarter than you, and I have the power to inflict massive damage on you, this animal or whatever. I can play God. I can deprive you of life and death. Meanwhile, I'm free and I'm the big man kind of thing. I'm just saying it's something to think about. And if you're thinking about that aspect, you wonder, does the sadism of tranquilizing someone only to bring them back, does that work in that situation? Does that fit into that scenario? It's a question. So anyway, Barry identifies this substance that reverses the tranquilizer effect. He says it's tolazine. And he says he's actually brought the chemicals, I guess, meaning those chemicals. Barry said he kept the chemicals in vials and injected the chemicals into darts. It's not used. He didn't use a licensed vet for the process. So that's also quite interesting. He's saying, I did it myself. I didn't actually I didn't follow certain protocols or certain procedures. When asked if he was able to do that all himself, he said, yeah, absolutely. So it's quite interesting how the agents ask what seem to be quite innocent questions. Were you able to fix the pin to the Bobcat yourself? Yeah, absolutely. What does that tell the agents about the Bobcat? Is Barry alone responsible for what the Bobcat did, right? Or was someone else fiddling with it? Was Barry alone responsible for the tranquilizer darts and how it was refueled and whatever? Or was someone else sort of fiddling with it, handling it? And in both cases, Barry is sort of, yeah, no, it's absolutely me. I can do it. I know how to do it, kind of thing. Barry was asked the last time he used those chemicals, and he said around the end of April 2020. That's very close to, I mean, it's around about 10 days shy of when Suzanne disappeared. It's timeline-wise very close to what we're talking about. So I put a big orange exclamation mark to that particular point. And then this, I put a big wow next to this particular sentence. And it's on page 119 of the affidavit. Special Agent Grussing asked if those chemicals could have been part of the workbench he cleaned off before he went to Broomfield, and he said could have been. He doesn't say no, and he doesn't say I don't recall. He says could have been, maybe. And do you know why that's important? Do you know why it's important that, so in other words, what they're talking about is that chemicals used in tranquilizer darts may have been on the workbench that he cleaned before he went to Broomfield. Well, guess when he went to Broomfield? May 10th. So in other words, they're saying, did you clean chemicals off your workbench, tranquilizer dart type stuff, on May 9th? And he doesn't say no, or absolutely not, or I'm 100% sure, or I don't recall. He says I could have been. To me, that is a significant, I don't want to say it's a concession because he doesn't say I did, but it's significant. And I think if that alone, if that had been the only thing that they got out of this interview, I think it's a big thing. It's a big thing to, if the prosecution are going to make a narrative, tell a narrative to the jury, that would add definitely some important color and detail to their narrative, and it's not disputed by Barry. So in other words, Barry's saying, yes, it's possible. It's possible that that did happen, right? In other words, it's anchored in his own evidence, his own statements. Carol says, I don't think there's anything sadistic about fishing or hunting if you're going to eat the meat. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Okay, let's keep going. We're almost done here. Barry admitted to submitting a ballot on Suzanne's behalf for the presidential election, saying, yeah, just because I wanted Trump to win, he said, I figured all these other guys were cheating, and I knew she was going to vote for Trump anyway. Special Agent Grussing informed Barry that was not legal, and Barry said, I didn't know you couldn't submit it for your spouse. Something I would just be interested to know is, what was Suzanne's political affiliation? You know, is it true? I would just be interested to know if that's true or not. Now we go to page 120. Barry said, all I have now is my hunting. That's all I have. And I've done it since I was 7 years old. So if I got to live this life without her, I at least want my hunting. And this year I'm going to travel. George and I is going to hunt. And it would be nice to have my guns and that I'm confident with and shot many animals and have great confidence in them. Be nice to have my cameras. When I go back to Indiana, I put them up there, and there's cell phone cameras that I can be anywhere in the country and I can get pictures of the deer that I'm hunting. So guns and cameras are my most important things on my wish list. It's interesting that this is quite a big paragraph that they quoting entirely verbatim. It's also interesting for quite a few reasons. One of the things that he acknowledges here is that he can use his cameras to remotely spy on animals, or that he can remotely do surveillance, and it's surveillance to his cell phone. So that's quite an interesting acknowledgement and admission. The other thing that I think is interesting here is, if you don't know by now that Barry's a hunter, if you don't know by now that it's part of his identity, then here he actually emphasizes it himself. He says, all I have now is my hunting. That is all I have. And he says, I've done it since I was 7 years old. So in other words, Hunting is very much part of his psychology. Hunting is how he, in some ways, navigates his life. Hunting is how he, I don't know, just say entertains himself, but it's the way that he knows what it means to be a person. So in order to be Barry, he needs to hunt, he needs to shoot, he needs to kill, right? That's kind of who he is. And so he says here, guns and cameras are my most important things on the wish list. It's interesting that he says guns and cameras. Guns are weapons and cameras are weapons of a sort. They are weapons used for surveillance. It's not just guns. He also wants those cameras. He puts them almost on the same level. Special Agent Harris tells Barry that when he talks about closure for himself and the girls, agents want to find her to give them that closure, and that agents want him to know that is a focus for them. Barry said, I know, and I just need to know from you guys, and I think I asked you this, if there's physical evidence that she's deceased. My family needs to know about that. So Barry's kind of asking straight out, have you found physical evidence that Suzanne is dead? Then he said, Barry said that somebody thinks Suzanne left and he needs evidence she's not still alive. So what do you guys think is the answer to that? Do you think there is physical evidence that she's deceased? What do you think the answer is to that? Before we get to what they say. Rebecca says he's fishing. Welcome, Stephanie. Good to have you here. Sorry, it was very last minute, this particular live. Carol says, this is one of the saddest cases I've ever heard. The fact that they were spying on each other and nobody loved each other anymore and it just came down to money and power. Margaret Zabinski, it's a difficult one. I'm not sure if one can say cadaver dog alerts are physical evidence. It's kind of a gray area. So in other words, a cadaver dog can alert. Then you want to test that area where it's alerting. And if you find DNA, obviously, but if you can confirm it's blood, then you may have evidence. You can also confirm that it's blood, but not be sure whose blood it is. And then it's evidence / questionable evidence, if that makes sense. Right? So I think the answer is there is actually no physical evidence that Suzanne has died. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence, and I think the most overlooked evidence is that she disappeared and she's still gone. In other words, if you had nothing, if you threw away this entire affidavit, and I still believe this is the strongest point that the prosecution have. It's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's not a case where you say, well, we don't know where Suzanne is, so anything could have happened, and so Barry is completely innocent in the situation. In other words, I don't think it reflects well on Barry that Suzanne has disappeared simply because Barry was the last to see her and Barry was the closest to her in a way, right? What I'm trying to say is I don't think you can kind of go, the fact that there's no evidence and wave that as a flag to say you don't have a case. To me, it's the opposite. The fact that this person has disappeared into thin air without a trace is significant evidence in itself, because people don't just disappear, and people don't just disappear like that, and people don't just disappear like that given the context of what is going on, right? And so that's why you want to ask someone who knew her, what do you think about the situation? And that's why it's not really that surprising that they've spoken to Barry 14, 15 times, right? So I understand the cliche of no body, no crime, but it actually works in reverse as well, which is someone has disappeared. What's your explanation for where they are? And then you might say, well, I don't know. Well, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. You can't just say, well, we don't know where she is. If you look at the circumstances surrounding it, it's lots of strange behavior, lots of arguments, and lots of different things. Obviously, you've got to put it together in a cogent narrative, but I certainly don't think you can say the fact that someone completely disappears means there's no evidence, and because there's no evidence, it means someone's completely innocent. It doesn't mean someone's completely guilty either. It just means there's a serious problem, right? That is why in the Madeleine McCann case, I certainly don't say the fact that Madeleine's been gone for 15 years means she's still alive. I think it's the opposite. I also don't think the fact that you haven't heard from her for 15 years means there's hope. I think most people would say there's less hope, not there's more hope the longer the period that you don't hear anything. Anyway, I don't know if it is necessary to go through all of that, but so they are asking Barry, or Barry's asking, is there any physical evidence? And here are actually 6 photos of him looking at the ground and so on. Special Agent Grissing tells Barry there's no way that Suzanne is not communicating on her phone Saturday night and Sunday morning if she's conscious and if she's able to access her phone. And Barry says, yeah. Barry doesn't argue with that. Barry doesn't disagree with that. And again, I think what they're saying indirectly there is, if she's not conscious, do you think she's alive? Now we go to the second last page, or what, the third last page? Second last page 121. Barry shrugs his shoulders and looks down. This is in terms of, is she alive or not? Right? He shrugs his shoulders and looks down. They've actually taken photos of him doing that. Special Agent Grissing says that it should not happen and compares agents knowing Suzanne's phone the way Barry knows how to use the Bobcat and how it behaves. Barry interrupts and he says, but Johnny, when you say that makes it look, and he stutters, he says, that makes me look like the bad guy. So you kind of get the sense that Barry's feels like he's kind of in their good books, that they're not going to think anything ill of him, right? Special Agent Grissing said that tells Barry that he is the one who is there, meaning he's the last one to see Suzanne. Barry said, I know, but it just didn't happen, right? What do you think he means? What just didn't happen? It's quite interesting language. It just didn't happen. He's being told, you were there, right? It's all about who's the bad guy here. And they say, but Barry, you were there. Barry says, I know, but it just didn't happen. Barry, what didn't happen? Special Agent Grissing says that if it's not Barry, somebody took her phone then. If Barry's not responsible, someone must have taken her phone. Barry said, like I said, I don't know what. I mean, you guys have got to give me, you've texted me, you're going to be my advocate. What did you mean by that? So yeah, Barry seems to suddenly break out of the whole vibe, the buddy-buddy vibe, right? Barry seems to kind of wake up, and now for the first time there's this sort of calling a spade in a way, right? And they've been talking about the bad guy and if his wife is really dead or alive. Is there any evidence of this? And so Barry then says, and they say, but Barry, you were there. Barry says, it just didn't happen. All very loaded phrases. And that's when Barry says, I thought you guys are going to be my advocates. What do you mean by that? It's almost like Barry's like, I assumed you'd be my advocates, but now tell me exactly, what do you mean? Are you my advocates? What is your position regarding me? And this is the part that's quite interesting. Now remember I said, is Barry the hunter in this equation? Is Barry got the edge in this equation? Or is Barry the hunted? Who's outfoxing whom? And look at the response here. Special Agent Grussing said that he told Barry he would be his advocate to represent Barry's statements the very best he can, meaning kind of like if I'm in court or if I'm writing an affidavit or whatever, I'm going to say what you told me. I'm going to repeat the narrative the way that you told me. That's kind of what he's saying. It's kind of an interesting word to use, but he says right now Barry's not going to stand up and tell everybody's story because he's smart enough not to do that. Once again, the defense here could say, wow, you're really buttering up Barry. You telling Barry how smart he is and you manipulating him. Barry's worried. Barry's got some flags going up, some red lights going on in his mind, and he's worried and he wants to know the truth. What do you really think about him? And were you honest here? Are law enforcement these deceitful, manipulative con artists? Who's the real con art? What's the real crime in this thing? And so, Barry's, they say, you're not going to stand up and tell everybody your story because you're smart not to do that, but you're going to tell us, right? So he says, Barry's talking to agents and we want to tell the unvarnished truth of what Barry's telling us and not shade it one way or the other. It's a kind of a clever way of saying, we're not going to twist what you're saying. We're going to say exactly what you've said. The thing that Barry doesn't seem to be realizing is, or I don't know, maybe he does, or maybe it's not the case, but has what Barry said reflected very well on him? I mean, Barry himself has said, it makes me look bad. So what Barry's told them, he says makes them look bad, and they say, we're going to tell everybody else what you told us, which indirectly, by inference, just using those semantics means you told us something that makes you look bad. Well, we're going to tell somebody else what you told us, and that might make you look bad. Do you follow what I'm saying? Barry's talking to agents, and we want to tell the unvarnished truth of what Barry's telling us and not shade it one way or the other. Barry responds to that with okay. Barry's, I guess, not quite sure what that means. I don't know whether he's feeling good or continuing to feel disquiet. Special Agent and Yara put two big exclamation marks next to this paragraph. Special Agent Grussing says that if Barry took her phone, agents can see that Barry is wanting to repair the relationship. It's quite an interesting thing. What it seems to me they are doing here is they making the argument that if Barry took Suzanne's phone, then one possible interpretation of that is that Barry wants to find out what's going on and he wants to repair the relationship. But it's another way of finding out or asking, Barry, did you take Suzanne's phone? And if you did take her phone, then maybe that's why she's not been communicating and then she's alive. I'm just saying that seems to be the maelstrom that they are touching on without being totally explicit about it. They sort of going around the thing that they are actually addressing, right? But what they're trying to find out is, did Barry take Suzanne's phone, right? They also kind of blame Suzanne. They say Suzanne is trying to do the opposite, meaning she doesn't want to repair the relationship. Suzanne wants to leave Barry. Suzanne wants to get divorced. Suzanne, this and this and this. So in the narrow confines of this particular statement, they're kind of saying that Suzanne isn't necessarily a good person because she's not trying to save their relationship, and Barry might be a good person if he's trying to repair the relationship, right? Then it says here, if Barry would come home and take her phone Saturday night, that would look bad for Barry if she went missing the next day. And at this point, Barry begins sliding his foot back and forth on the blade of the bucket on the Bobcat, and I've highlighted this. I find this part really incredible. And this is very close to the end of his very last statement before he got arrested. They are talking about Barry taking Suzanne's phone. They're talking about whether he would do that to repair the relationship or the opposite. And they talk about him taking her phone on Saturday night, and then she goes missing the next day. And while this is happening, Barry starts sliding his foot back and forth on the blade of the bucket of the Bobcat. Now, you might think that that is totally by the way. So what, is moving his foot around? I think there are two or three reasons to kind of raise your eyebrows and to note that. One of them is the fact that law enforcement mention it. I don't think law enforcement are mentioning that detail in the context of what is being brought up here. In other words, Suzanne being dead, Barry not looking good, things like the unvarnished truth, shading it one way or the other, and what's the other thing? Whose side are the agents on? At this point, Barry puts his foot on the blade and he moves it back and forth, right? So I think the context of him doing this is quite interesting, right? I think the fact that they mention it is quite interesting. They obviously think it's significant enough to mention. And I think the third reason is, I did say to you guys earlier that cadaver dogs did alert to the Bobcat. So it seems like the Bobcat is significant, could be significant in the story as well. Does that make sense? And yeah, they are standing beside the Bobcat talking about, is there any evidence that Suzanne is still not alive? Is there physical evidence that she's deceased? That is what Barry asked. And they're standing right beside the Bobcat. And the question is also, was the Bobcat used? Special Agent Grussing continues telling Barry the burden would be on agents to find out what happened to Suzanne and not him. Barry responds, yeah. Special Agent Grussing said it would make sense to agents that when he comes home around 2:44 p.m. on Saturday, that he could take her phone and she runs off or disappears or whatever happens, and Barry says, yeah. I've also got a big orange arrow there. Fortunately, that was a shallow cough. I think I need to wrap up. Almost at 2.5 hours anyway. To me, it's going to hurt picking up my doggy. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I'm almost done with this last page. Special Agent Grussing continues telling Barry the burden would be on agents to find out what happened to Suzanne and not him. And Barry responds, yeah. Special Agent Grissing says it would make sense to agents when he comes home around 2:44 on Saturday that he would take her phone, meaning he'd arrive home, take Suzanne's phone, and then she would run away, and then whatever happens, happens, and then Barry answers, yeah. Barry doesn't dispute that either. Barry doesn't say, I disagree or anything. He doesn't argue with that. Now, what I think is quite interesting there is what they're literally saying there is they almost presenting a scenario, they're presenting a possibility. Remember they presented the possibility earlier that did you clean tranquilizer type chemicals off your workbench before going to Broomfield? And he said, I could have. He's not disputing that. Over here, they're presenting him with a scenario where they say, you could have come home on that Saturday, taken her phone, and you can imagine if she's texting Jeff Libler, and she was, and he finds that out. In other words, he catches her out in flagrante delicto, right, in red-handed, as it were. Isn't she going to run away? He's caught her, you know what I mean? He's caught her out. In a marital sense, he's been hunting her, tracking her, and now he's actually caught her, in this affair, I guess. And what do you think Barry's going to do? Is he going to say, you know what, I'm happy for you. Where do I sign the check? Let's split everything half-half. Are they going to have a nice conversation? And he's going to say, you know what, I love you. I'm happy for you. Off you go. I'm going to let you have whatever it is you want. Or is he going to do this? Is he going to take her phone? She's going to run away. And then whatever happens, happens. And in this scenario, Barry says, yeah. Now, bear in mind, Barry had earlier given that other version of events. Now he's going along with this one where he's saying she'd run off. He'd take her phone and she'd run off. Why must she run off? Why does Suzanne need to run away from him? So he says, yeah. Special Agent Grissing says, it's our job to find her. Barry says, yeah. Barry again slides his foot along the cutting blade of the Bobcat. This is at this point in the conversation. She runs off and disappears, and then they talk about how we're going to find her. It's our job to find her. Here Barry slides his foot against the cutting blade of the Bobcat. Special Agent Grissing said, if there is something bad happened and it looks bad for Barry, he should tell agents and put the burden on them to do the rest of the investigation. I also think that's a bit of a mind job. They're kind of saying the burden here is on us. Well, if you've committed a crime, the burden is totally on the criminal, isn't it? But by saying the burden is on us, it kind of like almost makes it like the blame is on us, the responsibility is on us. You get what I mean? It seems like they're doing a bit of a mind job on him. Like, put the burden onto us, babe. Just tell us this, and then the burden's on us. It's actually not quite that way. The burden of proof is on them, but the actual burden, if a crime has been committed, guess who's going to have to serve a sentence if he's convicted? Who's going to have the burden of a potential guilty conviction? But they don't mention that. So now we're on the very last page, just 3/4 of a page 122. And this is Barry's response. Well, I must say I'm feeling a bit of pain here. Barry said, yeah, well, I've told you everything truthfully, both you guys. So it's in God's hands. I mean, he allowed this whole thing to happen. It's almost like he's blaming God. Anyway, Special Agent Grissing talks about how the pieces like Barry chasing around a chipmunk with a gun or the left turn for the bull elk are pieces that we need. Something else that I thought about is whether in someone's mind, Jeff Libler is represented by the bull elk. In other words, the whole staging of the bike and so on, the whole need to make Suzanne disappear. One wonders whether the bull elk symbolizes this sort of rival male or this dominant male figure, and that is what someone is thinking about in this whole process of dealing with Suzanne. Just something to think about. I've already mentioned, is there possible anthropomorphism with chipmunks, deer, and turkeys, all referring to a female? But what about a bull elk? Who does that refer to? Who does the mountain lion in the story refer to in somebody's mind, right? Just something to think about. Bear in mind, as I say, Barry's been a hunter his whole life. It's part of his psychology. Does he not sometimes think of people in animal terms? So anyway, Barry says, I know that all that stuff looks bad, but it's crazy that that stuff's even a part of this. I mean, it's crazy how that stuff, ironically, is part of this. It just makes no sense to me. Like, why would God allow pieces like that have to be answered in the situation? I don't get it. Special Agent Grusing asked Barry what his thought is on why. He wants to know, I guess, what, I'm not sure if he means motive or why based on what he's just said. Anyway, Barry says, I have no idea. I don't know his ways. He's way greater than us. I don't know. I've often thought, God, why? I thought that I'd be cleared in 2 months. And I've often asked God, why are you dragging me through this? You know, physically, this is not good for me, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I'm not angry with God. I fear him. I love him, respect him, know that he allows things to happen for reasons. I try to figure out why. I try to say in my head, if she's, and then he pauses here. If she's, pause, going through this, all this stuff that I found out since January, and maybe God wanted to protect the girls from heartache. I mean, I don't know, but, and then his voice trails off. So if you think about that whole sentence is his thought on why. He seems to put it in this oblique way onto God, that it sounds like he thinks Suzanne has died, and it also sounds like he's saying maybe God wanted to protect the girls from heartache. Just think about that. So did God want to protect his daughters from heartache, and so he protected them by making Suzanne just disappear? That's going to protect Suzanne from heartache. Maybe God wanted to protect the girls from heartache. In the same way that he uses animals for people, do you think he uses God for somebody else or something else? Just a question. God wanted to protect the girls from heartache. Do you think that's a reference to God, or is that something else? Special Agent Grusing talks about personal sacrifice and how this never goes away, and gives an example. Barry asks how he could live like that. Special Agent Grusing continues and tells Barry that if there's something that happened that makes him look bad, and he would trust agents with something like that, we could help him. Barry said, I gotta have help. I mean, if these people in Chaffee hate me, meaning the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office, like the word is they hate me, and they get to the DA, and he says he made our sheriff's department look bad, and we're going to blame it on him. Then my daughter, who's going to raise my daughter if they lock me up for something I didn't do? So it's quite interesting how he's framing this as, you know what, my poor daughter, who's going to look after her, you know, if if I'm blamed for this, right? It's also interesting how he's now taken the idea of him looking bad to the sheriff's department looking bad, right? Special Agent Grissing said, even if it is something you didn't do, but something tells you, but something you know about that would help us, maybe that is Barry's sacrifice. Barry said, yeah. Special Agent Grissing tells Barry he's not saying it will be easy, but this will not go away. This reminds me a little bit of the agent saying to Chris Watts, did Shanann do something? You know, I'm sure it's not you, but maybe you know something that can help us. And so they say, if there's something you know that would help us, maybe you could make that sacrifice. And then they say, this is not going to go away. Barry said, yeah, well, what happens from here? When do you guys go to them? Meaning the DA, what's the next step? Special Agent Grissing explains that agents will share the results with the district attorney's office and it will be up to them. Special Agent Harris offers again that Barry, how's this? That Barry take a polygraph. So this is at the very end of all of this. This is the last two lines of Barry's statements. The agents say, Barry, would you mind taking a polygraph? What do you think Barry answered? Let's do a quick poll. Do you think Barry took a polygraph, yes or no? Mel Stiller says, I don't trust these godly invocations. Good word. Stephanie says no. Martin Smallwood, no. Sharon Butler, no. No. So far, no one has said that he's taken a polygraph. Rebecca says no way. Mr. Mina says no. So Barry's response to this question, will you take a polygraph? He said, I'll pray about it. And then he says, I need to get going. So he's kind of asked, Barry, would you mind taking a polygraph? I'll pray about it. Sorry, guys, I've got to go. And then he tells the agents, be careful going back the way they're going. So, you know, the fact that they asked him to do a polygraph after all this, do you think it's because they believe him? Do you think it's because they think it's going to help his case, it's going to help him? The other thing that I think is quite interesting, remember I've been asking this throughout this analysis, who do you think's the hunter here and who do you think's the hunted? And what do you think, asking Barry right at the end, at the very end of all of these interviews, something like 15 or 16 separate interviews, Barry, will you take a polygraph? What do you think that is revealing about this hunter-hunted relationship? Doesn't it make you almost think about trapping someone? It's like a trap. You're trapped either way with either answer. If you do the polygraph and you're guilty, you're going to be caught out. If you don't do the polygraph, isn't that going to be quite suspicious? So you're trapped either way. Well, that's if you're guilty, right? So again, do you think that Barry outfoxed them or that they were outfoxed? What do you guys think? And bear in mind, it's not the end of the story. I mean, we've still got to find out for sure if this case is going to trial. We'll probably know quite soon. I personally think that there's a good chance it is going to trial. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to. We've dealt with quite a few cases now that haven't gone to trial. The Gabby Petito case looks like something might happen there. The Letitia Storr case has just been delayed, postponed. The Chad Daybell, Laurie Vallow case, just nothing happening there. Obviously, Chris Watts as well. So many cases where there just doesn't seem to be a trial or it just never happens. And so this is one of the cases that we are the closest to a trial. Well, will there be one? Well, that remains to be seen. If there is one, it's going to be about a month from now. Stephanie says a trial is important. It certainly is. All of this work, all of these questions, all of this investigation, the point of it is to have a trial. And another area in which one wonders whether there's going to be a trial is Alec Baldwin. All the legal shenanigans, is it going to end up in a court where evidence is led and someone comes to a decision, right? So let's just look at some of the other comments. Robbie Robbins says threw a net over him. Corina says, I sure hope it does. That's great news, Mel. Mel says, today the judge ruled that Chad and Laurie's trials will not be severed. Really glad to hear that. Not there yet, says, I think it's going to trial, and I think, okay. Okay. So yeah, we are just over 2 hours, 40 minutes. I'm really grateful that I've managed to get through this without choking up. I am feeling a bit of pain here. So I'm going to, I think, call it a day. Thanks a lot to the mods who've made it. I don't know is Bria still here. Thanks for making it, Stephanie. I know Jean Karras was here, Jean as well. Is Bria still here? If you're not, thanks for making it. And I know it's about 2 o'clock in the morning in France. Nisi's been a member for 2 months. She says, I hope you feel better soon. Thank you for all your hard work and dedication. All is appreciated. To you, Ivy, Timmy, and your gal. Thanks a lot for that, Nisi. And congrats for being a member for 2 months. Just to let you guys know what's going to happen going forward, we've now finished, we've completed all of Barry's statements. It covered, although it says 10 episodes, it was really closer to 12, I think. From here, we're going to deal with the witness statements. And in terms of that, I'm not going to open the chat to subscribers. It'll be members only. We're also then going to go through the affidavit dealing with the evidence and certain other things as well. So those of you who've enjoyed, the being able to chat, as we go closer into April, it's going to be members only. Some of you here, certainly the members, know that we were covering Vincent van Gogh. I need to still complete that, probably 2 or 3 episodes to go with that. I'm hoping to do one of those at least with Stephanie. So Stephanie, maybe Friday or this weekend, we can do the next episode. I have spoiled you guys a bit with some non-members only live streams. But as I say, as we go further through the affidavit, it will be members only. Something else that I'm hoping to do, I don't know, I hope I feel better than I do today, tomorrow, but I certainly have more time on my hands now because I can't train. So that kind of gives me at least an extra hour or 2 a day, I guess, to work. So there are a couple of things I want to do. One of the things I want to do is, don't laugh, but it's sort of an analysis on how I felt. Like, what's actually the mechanism of that accident? What actually happened? You might think it's silly, and you may even think it's very narcissistic, and maybe it is. But I'm certainly interested in it, and I honestly don't know exactly how I felt. You might think, it's almost like if you were interrogating me, that I'm lying or that I'm not being completely truthful. But it was honestly 1 second I was riding, and the next I was in the dirt. There wasn't a moment of, oh, I'm losing my balance, or I hit something. And so there's a little bit of a mystery surrounding that. And although I think I understand what had happened, I kind of want to sort of investigate it a bit. I have told quite a few people that I think the reason was a loss of concentration, that for a moment I lost concentration. I think that's half of what happened. I did lose concentration, but I think something else happened as well. And it would be interesting to think what you guys think as well. In a weird way, maybe it's also quite self-indulgent, but in a weird way, it's almost a similar question to the Everest disaster. Was it the weather or human error, right? And, how life works is something's never just one or the other. It's never black and white. It's never pure and simple. It's often some degrees of something, some degrees of something else. It's part of a continuum, right? And so it's also quite difficult just to isolate the one day that I rode and fell and say that's the complete story, because there were 2 other days where I suffered far more, that were far harder, that were technically far more difficult. The last day did have maybe some of the trickiest sections of the whole day. That is also true. I'd say some of the trickiest sections were on the last day, but I'd actually moved through that. So I'm thinking of trying to just gather my photos of my x-rays, some of the video I've got, and do a short little analysis of this as like a crime scene. And some of you may find it interesting, and some of you may find it horribly self-indulgent and narcissistic or something, and you don't have to watch it. But some of you might find it kind of a breath of fresh air, just a different look at something. Obviously, this is quite personal, and I'm still going through it, and I'm still trying to figure it out. To be honest, I feel so that it was so unnecessary. It was such a silly, unnecessary thing to happen. I wish I was better. I wish I didn't make a mistake. But it doesn't change what happened. But that's certainly how I feel. It was so unnecessary. And I've got a photo of where I fell in the dirt. And it's hard to look at that photo and go, oh, I can see what happened. It's like there was no reason for you to fall here. So that's what I want to just present to you guys. So on this channel, a lot of what we talk about makes sense. It's rational. It's logical. You can say it's intelligent or whatever. It's reasonable. 1 + 1 = 2. It all kind of goes together. But there's some things that are, I'm not saying it's not logical and it's not rational, but sort of things happen. And I'm not saying by that it's accidental. I'm just saying that sometimes things happen that are not random, but nevertheless, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that they do happen. And I think when those things happen, we're tempted to find some grand explanation rather than almost the humiliating truth. We're in a situation right now with what's going on in Ukraine. We want to have some grand explanation for what's happening. And I think the answer is, and it often happens in true crime as well, the reason people do something isn't because they've got some great disorder. It's not because of some great meaningful conspiracy. It's often because people are weak and flawed and they make mistakes. And towering people who are wise and strong and whatever can be felled by ordinary humanity, ordinary basic little things, and it's just part of life. Sometimes we make big mistakes where we, in true crime, you look at a premeditated thing, and that's a big mistake where someone knowingly did something. But sometimes we are felled by small mistakes that have devastating effects nevertheless. Martin Smallwood says, why do you think God allowed this to happen? I'm not sure what you're referring to. Do you mean the Morphew thing? Karina says, I totally understand. A moment in time and everything has changed. Carol says, did you have a GoPro on? I didn't have a GoPro on. I did have my phone with me. Someone else had a GoPro on, but she sort of departed kind of earlier. She was a little bit slower than some of us, so she departed earlier. She had a GoPro. She will obviously have footage of other parts of the ride, which maybe I can get hold of. What I can tell you is just a little bit of a preview of my experience. Is Bria still here? Oh, sorry, Stephanie, thank you so much for that. I saw it and I was going to respond. Stephanie, thanks a lot for that. Feel better. I'm so sorry you're hurting. Grateful you're still here. Things happen in a moment. True. Stephanie, it could have been worse. Like, my first response was, I don't know how I didn't break anything. And obviously, I didn't not break anything. I did crack something by the looks of it. They are still looking at my x-rays, so it's possible that there is a bit of more damage than I even know. So we'll see. Grateful that you're still here. I could have punctured a lung. I could have also injured my face. Somehow I fell body first, and I didn't actually injure my face at all. So in a weird way, I feel quite lucky. Even though it was kind of unlucky and dumb, I feel like I got off it kind of lightly in a way. So it's kind of a weird thing, I guess. Thanks a lot, not there yet. Thanks a lot. I definitely feel like I'm not there yet. I'm just the most frustrated that I've been building up my fitness, my strength, month after month for probably the last 4 or 5 months, and now it's like 6 weeks of just stopping all of that. I can't really train for 6 weeks. I'm going to try and research exercise you can do with a cracked rib. I'm walking my dog. I think I can maybe swim, but I am definitely going to try and find ways to try and. I'm certainly not going to sit around for 6 weeks. I definitely want to find what I can do to exercise, and I'm sure there are things. The right side of my body is quite strong and is fine, so maybe I can. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, what I wanted to say a little bit earlier. Someone said I never smile. But that definitely made me smile. Wow, Gathering Place, thank you so much. Sincere sympathy for your injury. I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot, Gathering Place. No, I really appreciate that. Something I wanted to say earlier was that I was riding with 3 really strong riders. I was kind of ahead of both of them, and then one of them passed me, and then another 2 passed me, and then I caught back up to them, and then the 3 of us caught back up to the one rider that had passed me. And then at this point, I think it was 2 fast riders and me, and I wasn't struggling to keep up with them. And so it was the 2 strong riders, me, and then another guy. I think he was riding an e-bike. And when I fell, I don't know if they didn't hear me. I don't think there would be any reason for them to suspect that I would have fallen, but anyway, I don't know if they didn't hear me. I'm pretty sure that the guy on the e-bike saw me fall and just went on. But his wife had actually fallen, and the ambulance had passed me minutes earlier. So if you're going to say I was in this daydream and I wasn't conscious that you could fall or whatever, well, an ambulance had just passed me, literally, probably 3-4 minutes earlier, and I mean, we were all aware of what had happened to his wife, and I actually still said to him as I passed him riding, I said, "Is your wife okay?" And he didn't respond. I don't know if he didn't hear me or if he's worried about her or what. And then I fell. But the part that was quite a shock and kind of a surprise was the moment I fell, there was a vehicle that stopped right next to me, and there were like 3 support vehicles. There was an ambulance that was always with us from riding right at the back. There was the bus that carried bikes. If you were tired, you could kind of jump on the bus. And then there was also a vehicle that I'm not quite sure what that was about. I think it had food in it and sort of technical support. It was sort of ridden by kind of a young dude. But what was quite weird was the moment I fell, like immediately, the vehicle was right there. And I think the first thing I said to the guy was, did you almost ride over me? In other words, he must have, in order to stop immediately, he must have been riding right behind me when I fell. And as I fell, it was a total shock to me. So it must have surprised him as well. And he said, no, he wasn't driving right behind me. It actually seems like he was starting to overtake me or something. But it was literally, so in that sense, it could also have been worse. I could have fallen in this car riding behind me that I didn't know was there, could have ridden over me, right? But what was really nice was I kind of got treatment immediately, just in the sense of, I mean, I had a lot of dirt in my arm, and I even got in the swimming pool shortly after that just to get the dirt off me. And I had a piece of, when I got home, even after swimming in the swimming pool, when I got home and I took my watch off, there was still a piece of gravel pebble under my watch, right? So, and yeah, I was still taking dirt out of my arms for a while after that. But so I sort of fell, got up pretty quickly, and those guys were there like immediately, and I just said, can you please give me some water? And I just used the water to rinse the dirt off. It was like nice ice cold water, just to rinse the dirt off my arm, and my arm had been shaved clear of skin. And I was using this water to wash it clean, and it was just nice to be able to do that. I obviously took a few sips of water, and I must say, as I said a few moments ago, the fall hurt less than the cough I had earlier today, which was absolutely excruciating. It was really, really, really sore. The fall was, I think a lot of it was reduced by the shock of it. It was sudden, and there was a certain amount of mild shock. But it wasn't terribly, terribly painful, as probably strange as that sounds. Today's cough was extremely, extremely painful. And I'm very fearful that I'm going to have more of them, where you have this sort of involuntary cough that sneaks up on you. So I don't know. I think I need to try and avoid foods that cause you to cough. And so far I've been able to do these lives without coughing. I don't know if you guys have noticed. I've done lives in the past where I've coughed. I haven't been coughing now. Anyway, I think that's enough about that. Like I said, I do want to put together a bit of a narrative where I provide photos and everything, and I'll take you guys through it. And some of you might find it interesting. Some of you may find it very narcissistic and self-indulgent, and that's fine. You don't have to watch it. Karina says, I feel your pain. Thanks for that. That's a good question from Terry. She says, did it make you think of the tragedy with your friend? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my friend was ridden over. I felt like one of my first thoughts was, could you have ridden over me? I've actually been wanting to call his wife and tell her, I don't know why, just tell her about what happened to me, and I don't know if it would be any comfort to her that you know, I don't know why, but I just sort of feel like I want to tell her about it. It has actually made me think of Van Gogh's injury and Helena Hutchins's injury, and I think feeling this kind of pain reminds you that pain isn't hypothetical, that you know, we talk about terrible things happening to people, and there are people experiencing unbearable pain. And I think sometimes when you are experiencing that pain, you realize it's not just a word. It's not just, oh, okay, wow, so that wasn't very nice. It's something you live with, and it's part of being alive. And something I said to the guys on the day that I fell, I said something like, I think it was the day that I fell at breakfast, I said, in the pursuit of life, there's death. In the pursuit of living, there's death. Meaning, when we try and look for experiences of life, you take risks that can kill you. And then look what happened to me. So, yeah. Stephanie says, in a split second, everything can change. That was also something that came up at breakfast. We were talking about, that's why I say, you might say, oh, I was in a daydream, I wasn't concentrating, I wasn't aware of this, I wasn't thinking or something. Earlier that very morning, we were talking about a cyclist who'd basically fallen, or who'd been found dead, almost like riding his bike. In other words, he'd been riding and they found him almost like still on his bike, but lying down and dead. So literally like someone turned the light off, right? And I even said, it was a conversation we had with three guys, two of the guys that I rode with, and a doctor who was with us. And I kind of said, you know, that's like the Matrix, where they unplug somebody and then they die in the Matrix. And I said, isn't that the reality of being alive? That at any moment you can die. In other words, this is not fictional or fanciful. It is literally that at any moment you can literally just drop dead because of an aneurysm or whatever, right? And that's terrifying. It's a terrifying thought. We go through each day kind of almost thinking that it's guaranteed, that we're okay. And because life is generally consistent, you have this impression that it's that way and just isn't. So I don't know if this is going to be good for me, this fall, where it's going to teach me to be more careful. I know in the previous gravel grinder that I did, there were 3 incidents where I almost fell back to back on the very first day. And I was like, I shouldn't have gotten through that unscathed. And so I think that does happen. You escape certain things, and then doesn't that make you kind of complacent, right? And then you forget about it. You forget that I was lucky. You forget again, I was lucky. You forget again, I was lucky. And then eventually you weren't lucky, right? Stephanie's been a member for 2 months in the TCRS VIP lounge. She says, my heart stung when I saw you hurt. I thought of you and Alex. I'm so grateful you are okay. Thanks a lot for that. I must say, I kind of miss Alex now because I would have liked to have spoken to him about this. I know he, I don't know if he broke a bone in his shoulder or he dislocated his shoulder, but I know he hit a tree very hard, and I just would have liked, because I didn't really know what to do. Should I go to a doctor? Should I have X-rays? It was hard to know what to do, and I think he would have known what to do. I think I did do the right thing going when I did go, and I'll obviously know more tomorrow. I'll know more the extent of whatever the damage is. It was nice that I felt better this morning. I felt better. What's today? Wednesday. I felt better on Tuesday than I did on Monday, and I think, better this morning. And then when I had that cough, I mean, now I feel worse than both Tuesday. I feel worse than I felt on Tuesday. I've got a feeling that feels like a constant slight cramp over here. It might be time for another painkiller. And the nice thing is those painkillers make me quite woozy, so I can just drift off. Karen Ora says, Nick, you need to give your ribs a couple of weeks of rest. Just take Timmy on short walks. No swimming. Okay. Stephanie says, glad you decided to go to the doctor to get x-rays. What was quite nice with the doctor was he's a mountain biker himself, and he was actually wanting to know where I went. He wants to do the same thing. So it seemed to be quite like I went to the right doctor. Not there yet says, does heat help? Apparently, you should use heat and cold. You should have heat and cold treatments. So I guess with Timmy lying against my side here, I'm getting the heat treatment now. Rebecca Hannah says, good night. Sorry, I have to leave. Don't worry, Rebecca. I'm about to leave myself. Stephanie says, oh, that's really interesting, neat about your doctor. I actually wanted to take a photo of the doctor looking at my x-rays. But yeah, in the end, I didn't. I did take a photo of the, I think, radiologist doing that. I did put some of that on Instagram. Okay, Timmy, I'm going to put you down. Okay, and then I'm going to go and sleep. Ugh. Bria, you must go to sleep just like I do. I need to. Timmy knows what to do. Love heals. I feel like Timmy's being a bit insensitive. Timmy doesn't seem to notice I'm injured. Like I would have thought his doggy self would sort of smell that I'm injured. I don't really get the sense that it's like, he's still the same Timmy. I want to go for a walk, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, maybe I need to give him more time. I don't know. I think I'm going to have a bath right now, a nice warm bath, and then take another pain pill. Corin says, ice for first 72 hours, then heat more. Okay. Endorphins and adrenaline can take over your body and mind. Please take care. Yeah, that's true. I was definitely feeling a bit of adrenaline. I was feeling really motivated. That's what's so crazy. I was feeling so good when something so bad happened. I mean, it's not like I was compromised by cramps or fatigue or, nothing like that. Corin says, Karen says he knows you're hurt, and that's why he wants to be near you. Well, he's sitting right by my feet right now. Stephanie says, not the kind of rest you wanted to gain from your trip. Now you must. Yeah, true. Karina says, I hope for all of us hurting a very good and restful sleep. I think things like sickness and pain, when you don't have those, life can almost seem bland and boring. But I think when you have sickness and pain, just being healthy, there's that saying, you have your health. It really is something. It's, you're alive. You can do so much with your life. And for me, kind of a big source of regret and just feeling like I'm missing out on life a bit is, I would have come back from this trip with my fitness boosted and going up another level. And I was really looking forward to that. I was really looking forward to being a lot stronger. And so it's so strange to be where I am now. You'd anticipated, you'd imagined, you'd expected this strengthening, only for it to be horribly inverted. But, life happens while you're making other plans. So it is humbling, totally is humbling. But anyway, I guess that's part of the fitness journey, right? Okay, guys, just again, thanks a lot for everyone who's participated. Thanks to the mods who've done a really good job as usual. Thank you to all of you guys in chat who just most of the time, virtually all of the time, you guys are very civil and just a great group. Thanks a lot for that. And I appreciate you guys taking an interest in my, my situation. I don't really like to make it about me, but I sort of feel like it's very front and center at the moment. So just in terms of Barry Morphew, we'll be continuing with the affidavit this month for the next week and then through April. So that's going to be quite interesting. We're going to go from here into the witness statement. So not what Barry said, what other people have said. And then, there's other content waiting that I'd like to get to. We'll see how that goes. I did say to someone that this is one of the biggest things that's ever happened to me in terms of physical damage. I was in a car accident where I damaged my knee. I don't think I've ever been through this much physical damage, serious physical damage. I think this is the top 3 most physical trauma I've ever been through. Physical trauma. Painful, it's also in the top 5 maybe. I wouldn't say it's the number 1 or number 2, but maybe the top 5. Today's cough was ultra painful. So I'm going to try and manage that, mitigate that. We'll see how it goes. Bria says, thanks to everyone here tonight. Excellent live. I learned a lot as usual. Great company as always. Thanks so much for being here, Bria, from pretty early on. Sharon Tuck as well. Fatika says, don't sweat it. You needed to vent. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for that. Thanks, guys. Thanks also for the super chats. I just want to thank Gathering Place again. Really appreciate that and what you said there. Sincere sympathy. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you guys again next time. Be prepared for a short notice thing like this. It's easier for me to do a live than to the editing and research. When I do episodes, often takes quite a lot more out of me in terms of not always, but in terms of concentrating, sourcing, and so on. So I might be doing a couple of more lives while I'm in this state. As long as my voice can handle it, I should be okay. Okay, guys, thanks again. Take care. Bria, sleep well. Those in the UK, sleep well. I think in the States it's also getting on quite late. Have a good night. Stay safe. See you guys next time.